Single dad used food stamps at checkout. The old lady behind him said, "I haven't seen my son in 20 years." And in that silent grocery line, no one knew her words would uncover a secret that would shatter hearts and reunite a family torn apart for decades. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead in the small-town Ohio grocery store, casting a harsh glow on the worn linoleum floor. Ethan Cole shifted uncomfortably at the checkout counter, his callous fingers carefully sorting through the food stamps. His daughter Lily, bright-eyed and innocent at 7, hugged a box of cereal to her chest like a treasure. "Daddy, can we get chocolate milk too?" Lily's voice carried clearly through the quiet checkout lane. Her pink backpack, frayed at the straps, bounced slightly as she rocked on her heels. Ethan's throat tightened. He glanced at the growing line behind them, feeling the weight of impatient stares. The cashier's fingers drummed against the counter, her expression a mix of boredom and judgment. "Not today, sweetheart," he managed, trying to keep his voice steady. "Maybe next time." The sound of more sighs from behind made his ears burn. He'd gotten used to this over the past year. The sideways glances, the whispered comments, the way people seemed to look right through him. But it still hurt, especially when Lily was watching. "Is there a problem here?" The store manager, Carl Benton, appeared suddenly beside the register. His name tag gleamed under the fluorescent lights, as polished as his disapproving stare. "No, sir," Ethan said quietly, still counting the stamps. "Just making sure I have enough." "There's a line forming," Carl pointed out unnecessarily. His voice clipped. Lily's small hand slipped into Ethan's, and he squeezed it gently. She was too young to understand the full weight of their situation, but she was old enough to sense tension. That was what hurt the most, knowing she felt these moments too. "I'm sorry," Ethan said, his voice barely above a whisper as he realized he was a few dollars short. "I'll need to put back I haven't seen my son in 20 years. The soft voice came from behind them. Ethan turned to see an elderly woman standing there, her silver hair neatly styled, wearing a worn but well-kept wool coat. Despite her elegant appearance, there was something deeply tired in her eyes. "Ma'am?" Carl asked, thrown off by the non sequitur. "I said I haven't seen my son in 20 years, she repeated, her voice gaining strength. And watching this young father trying his best for his little girl, she reached into her purse and pulled out a crisp $20 bill, placing it deliberately on the counter. No child should see their parent struggle like that. The silence in the checkout lane was deafening. Even Carl seemed at a loss for words. "Please," Ethan started to protest, his pride warring with necessity. "I can't." "You can," the woman, Margaret Hayes, said firmly but kindly. "And you will, because sometimes grace comes from unexpected places, and the right thing to do is simply accept it with gratitude." Lily looked up at the woman with wonder. "Thank you," she said brightly, unconsciously breaking the tension. "Daddy, can we get the chocolate milk now?" A small laugh rippled through the previously hostile line, and even Carl's stern expression softened slightly. Ethan's eyes stung as he nodded to his daughter. "Go ahead, sweetheart, quick now." As Lily skipped off to the dairy section, Ethan turned back to Margaret. "I don't know how to thank you." "You already have," Margaret replied softly, "just by being the kind of father who puts his child first. That's worth more than any $20. The transaction was completed in a new kind of silence, not the judgmental kind from before, but something more contemplative. Ethan gathered the bags, including the chocolate milk Lily proudly brought back, trying to maintain his composure. As they headed toward the exit, the cold November air seeping in through the automatic doors, Margaret's voice called out one more time. "Take care of that little girl," she said. "She's lucky to have you." Ethan nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. He helped Lily into their rusted pickup truck, secured the groceries, and drove away into the gathering dusk. Margaret's act of kindness warming his heart despite the chill in the air. The ancient heating system in their small duplex rattled and wheezed as Ethan stirred the pot of macaroni and cheese. The blue cardboard box sat crumpled on the counter, a reminder of their modest dinner. Steam rose in wisps, carrying the familiar processed cheese smell through their tiny kitchen. At the scratched wooden table, Lily hunched over her coloring book, her tongue poking out in concentration as she worked on filling in a unicorn with her favorite purple crayon. Her homework folder lay forgotten beside her, but Ethan didn't have the heart to interrupt her peaceful moment. "Daddy?" Lily looked up, purple crayon paused mid-stroke. "That grandma at the store today was really nice, wasn't she?" Ethan's hand stilled on the wooden spoon. The memory of the elderly woman's kindness made his chest tight with a mixture of gratitude and discomfort. "Yes, she was very kind. She reminded me of the grandmas in my books, Lily continued, now switching to a pink crayon. The ones who bake cookies and give warm hugs. Do you think she bakes cookies? The macaroni bubbled, and Ethan gave it another stir. I don't know, sweetheart, but we shouldn't assume things about people we don't know. I liked her smile, Lily said, pushing her dark curls away from her face. It was soft, like Mom's in the pictures. Ethan's throat tightened. He focused on draining the pasta, letting the steam hide the moisture in his eyes. The woman's gentle intervention had saved him from humiliation, but it also reminded him of how far he'd fallen. A mechanic turned day laborer, barely making ends meet. What would his father have thought? Daddy! Lily's voice brightened with sudden inspiration. We should bake something for her to say thank you. Ethan turned from the sink, studying his daughter's eager face. Despite everything they'd been through, Lily's heart remained open and generous. Maybe that was worth more than any amount of money in the bank. You know what? He smiled. Really smiled. For the first time that day. That's actually a wonderful idea. It would be a good way to show gratitude. Can we make banana bread? Lily bounced in her chair, her coloring forgotten. Like we did for Miss Jenkins when she helped me with reading? We have those overripe bananas that need using, Ethan agreed, spooning the mac and cheese into their mismatched bowls. We can bake it after dinner. They ate their simple meal while Lily chattered about her day at school, her friend Emma's new puppy, and how her teacher said she was getting better at multiplication. Ethan listened, grateful for these moments when their struggles seemed far away. After dinner, they cleared the small counter space. Lily stood on her step stool, proud to be tall enough to help. Together, they gathered their ingredients, the spotty bananas, flour, sugar, and the last egg in the carton. Can I mash the bananas? Lily asked, already rolling up her sleeves. Go for it, kiddo. Ethan handed her a fork and the peeled bananas in a bowl. Just try to keep it in the bowl this time. Lily giggled, attacking her task with enthusiasm. Small chunks of banana flew occasionally, but Ethan didn't mind. The sound of her laughter was worth any mess. They measured ingredients together, Ethan guiding Lily's small hands as she leveled the flour with careful concentration. A dusting of white covered their clothes and the counter, but they worked as a team, just as they had since losing her mother. Do you think she'll like it? Lily asked as Ethan poured the batter into their dented loaf pan. I'm sure she will, he answered, smoothing the top with a spatula. It's not about how fancy the gift is, Lily. It's about showing someone you appreciate their kindness. While the bread baked, filling their small home with its sweet aroma, Ethan helped Lily with her homework. Math problems and spelling words provided a welcome distraction from his swirling thoughts. Later, after tucking Lily into bed with her favorite stuffed elephant, Ethan sat at the kitchen table. The banana bread cooled on the counter, its golden brown top slightly cracked, homey and imperfect, like their life. His eyes drifted to the worn photograph propped against the windowsill. In it, his father, Michael, stood beside a restored Chevrolet, his sleeves rolled up and a proud smile on his face. Ethan barely remembered him. Just fragments of memories, the smell of motor oil, strong hands lifting him onto broad shoulders. The photograph seemed to watch him, and Ethan wondered what his father would think of him now. Would he understand the choices Ethan had made? Would he be proud of a son who needed help buying groceries? Who accepted charity from strangers? The heating system groaned again, and Ethan rubbed his tired eyes. Tomorrow, they would deliver their humble thank you gift, and he would face the kind woman's eyes again. For Lily's sake, he would swallow his pride and teach her that gratitude matters more than ego. Maybe that's exactly what his father would have wanted him to learn. The next morning painted Ohio's streets in a delicate dusting of early snow. Ethan's old pickup truck hummed down Cedar Lane, its worn wipers squeaking against the windshield. In the passenger seat, Lily clutched the still-warm banana bread wrapped in a checkered dish towel, her breath fogging up the window as she counted mailbox numbers. Is that it, Daddy? She pointed at each house they passed, her excitement growing with every no from her father. Ethan glanced down at the wrinkled grocery receipt where he'd noticed Margaret's address printed at the top. His hands tightened on the steering wheel. What if this was a mistake? What if she thought they were just after more charity? There! Lily's voice jumped with joy. Number 42, a small cottage emerged from behind bare maple trees, its white picket fence standing like sentinels against the gray morning. The house itself was modest but well kept, with pale yellow siding and dark green shutters. An empty porch swing swayed gently in the winter breeze, and neatly trimmed rose bushes, now dormant for winter, lined the narrow walkway. Remember what we talked about, honey? Ethan asked as he helped Lily out of the truck. We're just dropping off the bread to say thank you. We won't stay long. I know, Daddy. Lily skipped beside him, careful not to drop their gift. But what if she invites us in? That would be polite to say yes, right? Before Ethan could answer, the front door opened. Margaret stood there in a powder blue sweater and dark slacks, her silver hair neatly pinned back. Her eyes widened in surprise. "Oh my," she said softly. "What a wonderful surprise." Lily bounded forward. "We made you banana bread to say thank you for being so nice yesterday." Margaret's hand flew to her heart, and Ethan noticed how delicate her fingers looked, wrapped in a simple gold wedding band. That's so thoughtful of you both. Please, won't you come in? It's much too cold to stand out here." Ethan started to decline, but Lily was already following Margaret through the door, and he found himself stepping into a home that felt like stepping back in time. The living room walls were painted a warm cream color, adorned with framed biblical verses in elegant script. Family photos lined the fireplace mantel, their silver frames catching the morning light that filtered through lace curtains. "I just put on a pot of tea," Margaret said, taking the banana bread from Lily, "and I believe I have some hot chocolate mix in the cupboard for young visitors." The kitchen was small but immaculate, with worn but spotless linoleum floors and copper-bottom pots hanging from a rack. While Margaret prepared their drinks, Lily wandered the living room, drawn to the photos and trinkets that filled every surface. "Your house is like a treasure box," Lily declared, making Margaret laugh, a sound that seemed to surprise even her. "That's what my Harold used to say." Margaret's voice grew softer as she set down 3 mismatched teacups on a tray. "He never could understand why I needed so many little things, but he built me shelves for every single one." "Harold was your husband?" Ethan asked, accepting a steaming cup of tea. Margaret nodded, sinking into her armchair. A cross-stitched cushion proclaimed "Amazing Grace" in faded threads. "Yes. We had 42 wonderful years together before the Lord called him home. That was, almost 25 years ago now." "I'm sorry," Ethan said quietly, recognizing the familiar shadow of loss in her eyes. "Don't be, dear. He lived well and loved deeply. That's all anyone can ask for." She paused, watching Lily, who had discovered a small collection of angel figurines. "Though I must admit, the house grows quiet when you're alone. My son Michael, well, we had a disagreement after Harold passed. Pride got in the way, on both sides I suppose. Haven't spoken since." Ethan saw the pain beneath her composed expression, like looking in a mirror of his own grief. Before he could respond, Lily gasped in delight. "Look what I found!" She carefully held up a small crocheted angel doll, its white yarn wings slightly yellowed with age. "She's beautiful." "Oh my." Margaret's eyes misted over. "I made that for Michael when he was just a boy. He was afraid of the dark, you see, so I told him angels would watch over him while he slept." Lily cradled the doll with reverence. "Did it work? Was he not scared anymore?" "It did help, yes." Margaret smiled, then made a decision. "Would you like to have her? I think she'd rather watch over a child than sit on my shelf gathering dust." "Really?" Lily looked to her father for permission, her eyes shining. Ethan started to protest, but Margaret held up her hand. "Please. It would make this old woman very happy to see her bringing comfort again." They stayed longer than Ethan had planned, sharing stories over tea and banana bread. Margaret told them about her years teaching Sunday school, while Lily chattered about her favorite books and the castle she was building with blocks at school. The morning light grew stronger, casting warm squares on the carpet through the lace curtains. Finally, Ethan noticed the time. "We should get going. Lily has her reading group at the library this afternoon." Margaret walked them to the door, wrapping Lily in a gentle hug. The little girl clutched her new angel doll close, beaming. On the porch, Margaret touched Ethan's arm lightly. "Thank you for this morning," she said. "Sometimes the Lord sends exactly what we need, even when we don't know we need it." From the truck, they watched Margaret wave from her porch, a small figure against the yellow house. As Ethan pulled away, he felt something he hadn't experienced in a long time, a quiet sense of peace, as if the world had shifted ever so slightly back into place. A week later, Ethan pushed his shopping cart down the frozen foods aisle, checking his grocery list twice. The store felt warmer today, less intimidating. Lily skipped alongside him, her small hand trailing along the cool glass doors. "Can we get ice cream, Daddy?" Lily asked, her breath fogging up the freezer door. "Not today, sweetheart. We're sticking to the basics," Ethan said gently, adjusting his worn jacket. As they rounded the corner toward the produce section, a familiar figure caught his eye. Margaret Hayes stood examining tomatoes, her silver hair neat under a cream-colored wool hat. She wore the same dignified expression he remembered, though today her eyes seemed brighter. Lily spotted her first. Look, Daddy, it's the nice grandma. She waved enthusiastically, making Margaret look up from the vegetables. Why, if it isn't my little angel. Margaret's face softened into a warm smile. She set down her basket and opened her arms as Lily rushed over for a hug. How are you, Mrs. Hayes? Ethan asked, pushing his cart closer. Please, call me Margaret, she insisted, straightening up. I'm doing well, just picking up a few things for soup. They chatted while Lily examined the colorful bell peppers nearby. Margaret asked about their week, and Ethan told her about Lily's good grades in school. The conversation felt easier than before, more natural. After checking out, they found themselves walking to their cars together in the crisp afternoon air. Margaret's sedan was parked next to Ethan's pickup truck. Oh, before I forget, Margaret exclaimed, opening her trunk. She pulled out a small paper bag. I made this for Lily. With the weather turning cold, she retrieved a carefully folded scarf in soft purple yarn. Mrs. Hayes, Margaret, you really shouldn't have, Ethan started, but Lily's delighted gasp cut him off. It's so pretty, Lily exclaimed, running her fingers over the intricate stitches. Margaret wrapped the scarf around Lily's neck with practiced hands. There now, warm as toast. Ethan watched the tender gesture, something tightening in his chest. Thank you. That's really kind of you. It keeps these old hands busy, Margaret said modestly. Though speaking of keeping busy, I could use some help. My porch railing's gotten wobbly, and I haven't found anyone reliable to fix it. I could take a look, Ethan offered without hesitation. I used to work as a mechanic. Basic carpentry isn't too different. Oh, I couldn't impose. Please, I insist. It's the least I can do. They arranged for Ethan to come by that weekend. Over the next few days, he spent his afternoons after work at Margaret's house, fixing not just the railing, but other small repairs he noticed needed attention. A loose cabinet hinge here, a squeaky door there. On the third day, as Ethan worked on securing the last section of porch railing, Margaret brought out 2 steaming mugs of coffee. Lily was inside, contentedly drawing at the kitchen table. You don't know what a blessing this is, Margaret said, settling into her porch chair. The house hasn't had a man's touch since Harold, my husband, passed. Ethan wiped his hands on his jeans and accepted the coffee. Happy to help. My dad taught me to always leave things better than you found them. A shadow crossed Margaret's face. Your father sounds like a wise man. I wouldn't know, really. He wasn't around much. Ethan took a careful sip of coffee. Died when I was young. Margaret's hands tightened around her mug. My Michael, my son, he left home after his father died. We had such terrible arguments. Her voice grew distant. I was too proud, too certain I knew best. By the time I realized my mistakes, he was gone. Ethan sat quietly, letting her speak. 20 years, Margaret continued, her eyes fixed on the horizon. 20 years of Christmases, birthdays, everyday moments all lost to stubbornness. Mine and his both. She dabbed at her eyes with the tissue from her sleeve. Sorry, I don't mean to burden you with ancient history. It's not a burden, Ethan said softly. Sometimes sharing the weight makes it lighter. Margaret smiled sadly. You have an old soul, Ethan Cole, and a good heart. They sat in comfortable silence as the afternoon light began to fade. Inside, they could hear Lily humming to herself. I keep thinking I'll get a phone call someday, Margaret admitted, that he'll want to make amends. But maybe that's just foolish hope. Hope's never foolish, Ethan replied, standing to gather his tools. Neither is forgiveness. As he loaded his toolbox into the truck, Lily bounced down the porch steps to give Margaret a tight hug goodbye. The purple scarf fluttered in the evening breeze. Ethan and Lily climbed into the truck, waving as they pulled away. Margaret stood on her newly repaired porch, one hand raised in farewell. As their taillights disappeared around the corner, she touched the wooden railing, smooth and solid under her fingers. You remind me of him, she whispered to the empty air. The morning sun filtered through thin curtains as Ethan helped Lily with the buttons on her favorite polka dot dress. She wiggled impatiently, excited for church as always. Hold still, honey, Ethan said, smoothing down her collar. Just one more button. Can we invite Margaret? Lily asked suddenly, her blue eyes bright with hope. She lives all alone, and Jesus says we should be kind to everyone. Ethan paused, touched by his daughter's thoughtfulness. That's very sweet of you to think of her, but we don't want to put her on the spot. Please, Daddy. Lily clasped her hands together. We can stop by her house on the way. It's not far. Ethan checked his watch. They had enough time if they hurried. All right, he agreed, but if she says no, we respect that, okay? Lily nodded eagerly, already running to get her shoes. 20 minutes later, their old pickup truck rumbled to a stop in front of Margaret's cottage. The morning frost still clung to her neat lawn, and smoke curled from her chimney. Lily was out of the truck before Ethan could stop her, charging up the path to knock on Margaret's door. Margaret appeared wearing a simple gray dress, her silver hair perfectly styled. "Well, good morning," she said, surprise evident in her voice. "Will you come to church with us?" Lily burst out, bouncing on her toes. "Please?" Margaret's hand fluttered to her throat. "Oh, I haven't been to church in quite some time. It's okay if you'd rather not," Ethan said quickly, not wanting her to feel pressured. Margaret looked between them, hesitation clear on her face. I wouldn't want to intrude." "You won't be intruding," Ethan assured her softly. "There's always room for one more." Something in Margaret's expression shifted, like ice melting in spring. "Let me get my coat," she said finally. Inside the small Methodist church, they sat in the back pew at Margaret's request. The wooden bench creaked as they settled in, Margaret sitting primly with her hands folded in her lap. Lily nestled between them, her small legs swinging as she hummed along with the opening hymn. The sermon that morning seemed meant especially for them. Pastor Roberts spoke about forgiveness, about how grace wasn't earned but freely given. "Sometimes," he said, his voice carrying through the hushed sanctuary, "the hardest person to forgive is ourselves." Ethan noticed Margaret dabbing at her eyes with a lace handkerchief. He recognized something in her expression, the same weight of regret he often carried himself. After the service, Lily tugged on Margaret's sleeve. "Are you hungry? Daddy and I always get pancakes after church." Margaret glanced at Ethan, who smiled warmly. "We'd love to have you join us," he said. The diner was busy with the after-church crowd, but they found a quiet booth near the window. Sunlight streamed across the worn Formica table as Lily colored her kids' menu, chattering about Sunday school. "And then we learned about Noah's Ark," she explained to Margaret between bites of blueberry pancakes. "Did you know it rained for 40 whole days?" "I did know that," Margaret replied, her eyes twinkling. "I used to teach Sunday school myself many years ago." "Really?" Lily's eyes widened. "What else did you teach about?" As Margaret launched into a gentle explanation of David and Goliath, Ethan watched them together. There was something right about this moment. The three of them sharing a meal, Margaret's usual reserve melting away as she answered Lily's endless questions. Before they left, Margaret reached into her purse and pulled out a small package wrapped in tissue paper. "I've been meaning to give this to you, Lily," she said. "I hope you don't mind, Ethan." Lily carefully unwrapped it to reveal a beautiful leather-bound children's Bible, its cover soft and brown. Inside, Margaret had written in elegant script, "To Lily, may God's word light your path. Love, Margaret." "It's beautiful," Lily breathed, running her fingers over the gold-edged pages. "Thank you, my son." Margaret's voice caught for a moment. "I gave him his first Bible when he was about your age. I've always believed that faith is the greatest gift we can share." That evening, as Ethan tucked Lily into bed, he noticed the Bible propped carefully on her nightstand, right next to her favorite stuffed bear. The sight of it, this tangible symbol of Margaret's care, made his throat tight with emotion. "Daddy?" Lily asked sleepily. "Can we bring Margaret to church again next Sunday?" "We'll ask her," Ethan promised, pulling her blanket up. He switched on her nightlight and paused in the doorway, looking back at his daughter's peaceful face in the soft glow. Standing there, he offered up a silent prayer of thanks for his daughter's pure heart, for Margaret's unexpected presence in their lives, for the way God sometimes answered prayers he hadn't even known to ask. The Bible on the nightstand caught the light, its golden edges gleaming like a promise. A crisp autumn breeze rustled through the trees as Ethan parked his truck in front of Margaret's cottage. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across her neatly trimmed lawn. He grabbed his toolbox from the passenger seat, its familiar weight comforting in his calloused hands. "Oh, thank goodness you're here," Margaret said, opening the door before he could knock. She wore a flour-dusted apron, the smell of fresh baked cookies wafting from inside. "That pipe's been driving me crazy all morning." "No problem at all, Mrs. Hayes." Ethan followed her through the living room toward the kitchen. "Least I could do after all your kindness." The pipe under her sink had a simple leak, just needed a washer replaced and some tightening. As he worked, Margaret busied herself arranging cookies on a plate, humming an old hymn. The afternoon light streamed through her lace curtains, making dust motes dance in the air. "Would you like some coffee?" she asked when he finished, wiping his hands on a rag. "These cookies just came out of the oven." "That'd be nice, thank you." Ethan stood, his joints creaking slightly. The warmth of her kitchen felt inviting after crawling around under the sink. While Margaret prepared the coffee, Ethan wandered into her living room. Family photos lined the walls and shelves, moments frozen in time. His eyes swept across them casually until they landed on one particular frame on the mantel. The photo showed a younger Margaret, her dark hair streaked with silver, standing beside a tall man with kind eyes, her late husband. Between them stood a teenage boy, maybe 15 or 16, with a half smile that made Ethan's heart skip a beat. He stepped closer, his hands suddenly cold. The boy's features were so familiar it made his chest tight. The same strong jaw, the same slight tilt of the head, the same crinkles around the eyes when he smiled. It was like looking at a mirror image of his own teenage years. "That's my Michael," Margaret said softly behind him, making him jump. She set down a tray with coffee and cookies. "My son." He would have been about 48 now. Her voice carried a weight of sadness. The photo was taken just before his father passed away. Things changed after that. Ethan's mouth felt dry. "What happened?" he asked, though his voice sounded distant to his own ears. Margaret sank into her armchair, her fingers tracing the rim of her coffee cup. "We had different ideas about his future. I wanted him to go to college, follow in his father's footsteps. He wanted to travel, see the world." She sighed. "We both said things we regretted. One day, he just left. Never even said goodbye." Ethan's mind raced. His father had never spoken about his family, always changed the subject when asked. They'd moved around a lot when Ethan was young, never staying in one place too long, as if running from something or someone. "Did you ever try to find him?" Ethan's voice cracked slightly. "Every few years I'd hire someone to look, but he'd changed his name, they said. The last time I got any news was about 15 years ago. They told me he'd settled somewhere in Indiana." Her eyes grew distant. "I often wonder if he has children of his own now, if I have grandchildren out there somewhere who don't even know I exist." Ethan's hands trembled as he accepted a cookie he knew he couldn't eat. The pieces were falling into place like a puzzle he'd never known he was solving. "I should get going," he said, abruptly standing. "Lily will be home from her friend's house soon." Margaret looked disappointed but nodded. "Of course, dear. Thank you again for fixing the pipe." The drive home passed in a blur. As soon as he walked through his front door, Ethan went straight to the hall closet. In the back, behind winter coats and old shoes, sat a dusty cardboard box he hadn't opened in years. His hands shook as he pulled out the old photo album. The leather cover was cracked and worn, but the pictures inside were still clear. He flipped through pages of his childhood until he found what he was looking for: his father's high school graduation photo. There it was, the same face as the teenage boy on Margaret's mantel. Below the photo, written in his mother's neat handwriting, "Michael Hayes, class of 1990. Ethan sat back against the wall, the album heavy in his lap. His father's real name had been Michael Hayes, not Michael Cole, as he'd always known him. The timelines matched, the faces matched, even their mannerisms matched. From what Margaret had described, he stared at the photo, his vision blurring. The truth hit him like a physical blow. Margaret Hayes wasn't just some kind stranger who'd helped him at the grocery store. She was his grandmother, his father's mother, Lily's great-grandmother. The sound of his own heartbeat filled his ears as he looked at the photo. Every interaction with Margaret over the past few weeks played back in his mind with new meaning. Every story she told about her son, his father, took on new weight. Ethan's hands trembled as he traced his father's young face in the photograph. All this time, the family connection they'd both been longing for had been right there, hidden in plain sight. The question now was, what should he do with this knowledge? The morning sun streamed through the threadbare curtains of Ethan's small duplex as he paced back and forth across the worn carpet. His footsteps made soft creaking sounds on the floorboards, matching the rhythm of his racing thoughts. The photo he discovered at Margaret's house lay on the coffee table, next to his own family album. Lily sat at the kitchen table, humming as she colored, oblivious to her father's distress. Her crayons scratched against paper while she drew what looked like 3 stick figures holding hands: herself, her dad, and Margaret. "Almost done with breakfast, sweetheart?" Ethan asked, trying to keep his voice steady. He glanced at the clock for the 10th time that morning. "Uh-huh." Lily nodded, taking another bite of toast. "Are we going to see Miss Margaret today?" The innocent question made Ethan's stomach twist. He ran his fingers through his hair, already messy from hours of sleepless tossing and turning. "Yeah, honey, I need to check on that cabinet I fixed for her." But the cabinet was just an excuse. The truth sat heavy in his chest like a stone. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the faces in those photographs. His father as a young man, Margaret's son Michael, the pieces of a puzzle he never knew existed suddenly fitting together. After dropping Lily at school, Ethan drove to Margaret's house. His hands gripped the steering wheel so tight, his knuckles turned white. The morning was cool and clear, with leaves dancing across the sidewalk in swirling patterns. Margaret's garden looked particularly beautiful today, the late autumn flowers still holding onto their colors despite the chill. She opened the door before he could knock, wearing an apron dusted with flour. The smell of fresh-baked cookies wafted out. "Ethan, what a lovely surprise! Come in, come in. I was just baking your favorite oatmeal raisin." The warmth of her welcome made his chest ache. He followed her into the kitchen, where sunlight streamed through lace curtains onto the checkered tablecloth. Everything about her home felt like it should have been part of his life all along. "How's our little Lily today?" Margaret asked, placing a plate of cookies on the table. "I finished another scarf for her. This one's purple, her favorite color." Ethan's throat tightened. "She's good, at school now, working on a special art project." "Oh." Margaret's eyes brightened with interest as she poured 2 cups of coffee. "She's such a creative child. You know, she reminds me of my Michael when he was young, always drawing, always imagining." The name made Ethan's heart skip. He wrapped his hands around the warm coffee mug, trying to steady himself. How's your weather garden doing?" Margaret smiled, though her eyes held a hint of confusion at the abrupt change of subject. "The chrysanthemums are holding on beautifully, though I worry about that frost they're predicting next week." They talked about safe topics, the weather, Lily's school, the upcoming church bake sale. All the while, the truth burned in Ethan's throat like hot coal. Every time Margaret smiled at him with that grandmother's warmth, every time she spoke of Michael with that mix of love and regret, he felt the weight of his silence growing heavier. "You know, Ethan," Margaret said softly, reaching across the table to pat his hand, "I've been thinking a lot lately about God's plan, how he works in mysterious ways." Ethan's coffee cup trembled slightly. "What do you mean?" "Well," she continued, her eyes growing misty, "I've been so alone these past years. I pushed everyone away after losing Robert, my husband, and then that terrible fight with Michael. I thought God had forgotten me." She squeezed his hand. "But then he sent you and Lily into my life, like angels, really." Ethan had to look away, blinking hard against the sudden burn of tears. The guilt churned in his stomach, bitter and sharp. Here was this kind woman, his grandmother, pouring out her heart to him, while he sat holding on to a truth that could change everything. "I'm no angel, Margaret," he managed to say, his voice rough. "Now don't sell yourself short," she chided gently. "You've brought so much light back into my life. Sometimes I think," she paused, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, "sometimes I think this is God's way of giving me a second chance at family." The words hit Ethan like a physical blow. He stood up suddenly, nearly knocking over his coffee cup. "I should go. I've got work." Margaret looked startled but recovered quickly, smoothing her apron. "Of course, dear. Take some cookies for Lily." She packed a dozen into a paper bag, pressing it into his hands. "And Ethan, thank you for visiting. It means more than you know." He nodded, not trusting himself to speak. The paper bag crinkled in his grip as he hurried to the door, Margaret following behind. On the porch, she touched his arm. "You're a good man, Ethan Cole. Your father, wherever he is, must be very proud." The words nearly broke him. He mumbled a goodbye and practically ran to his truck, his vision blurring. As he pulled away from the curb, he looked back at Margaret's house in his rearview mirror. The porch light was still on from the morning darkness, flickering slightly in the autumn afternoon. It seemed to pulse with the same uncertainty that filled his heart, a dim reminder of the truth he couldn't bring himself to speak. Margaret stood in the doorway, waving, her figure growing smaller as he drove away, just like she must have watched her own son leave all those years ago, not knowing he would never return, not knowing her grandson had been just minutes away all this time. Ethan's hands shook on the steering wheel. The truth was right there, waiting to be told, but the words remained locked inside him, held back by fear and doubt and the terrible weight of what might happen next. A week had passed since Ethan's discovery, and winter had transformed their small Ohio town into a Christmas card scene. Fresh snow blanketed every surface, muffling sounds and making the world feel softer somehow. The afternoon sun caught in the icicles hanging from Margaret's porch roof, creating tiny prisms that danced across the white-painted wood. Inside Margaret's warm kitchen, the aroma of fresh-baked cookies filled the air. Lily stood on a wooden stool next to Margaret, carefully pressing a star-shaped cookie cutter into the rolled dough. Her tongue poked out slightly in concentration, determined to make each shape perfect. "Like this, sweetheart?" Margaret guided Lily's small hands. That's right, nice and gentle. Ethan watched from the doorway, his heart both full and heavy. The scene before him was everything he'd wanted for Lily. The warmth of family, the simple joy of baking with a grandmother, but the truth he carried made each moment bittersweet. Daddy, look! Lily held up a perfectly cut star. Grandma Maggie showed me how to do it without breaking the points. The word grandma made Ethan's chest tighten. Margaret beamed at the title, completely unaware of how accurate it really was. She'd started using it naturally after Lily had first called her that last week, and now it seemed to slip from the little girl's lips as easily as breathing. That's beautiful, sweetie, Ethan managed, forcing a smile. They'd fallen into an easy routine over the past week. After school, he'd bring Lily to Margaret's while he worked his evening shift at the warehouse. They'd all have dinner together when he returned, sharing stories around Margaret's old oak table. The house had come alive with Lily's laughter and the constant bustle of family life. Margaret's living room now boasted a small Christmas tree they decorated together. Lily had made paper chains for garland, and Margaret had brought out delicate glass ornaments she hadn't used in years. No point decorating just for myself, she'd said, but her eyes had sparkled as she unwrapped each precious bauble. Son, would you hand me that cooling rack? Margaret asked, gesturing to the counter behind him. The word son hit him like a physical blow. She'd started using it occasionally, catching herself sometimes with a slight blush. Force of habit, she'd apologize, but Ethan could see how natural it felt for her, how much she needed someone to mother. He handed her the rack, their fingers brushing. Her hands were soft but strong, marked with the slight tremor of age but still capable and sure. His grandmother's hands, the thought almost made him drop the rack. These cookies remind me of the ones I used to make with my Michael, Margaret said softly, carefully transferring the hot cookies. He loved helping in the kitchen when he was small. She paused, lost in memory. Before everything went wrong, Lily looked up from her dough cutting. What went wrong, Grandma Maggie? Margaret's smile turned sad. Oh, just grown-up things, dear. Sometimes people let pride get in the way of love. She glanced at Ethan, but God has a way of bringing new people into our lives when we need them most. The guilt settled deeper in Ethan's stomach. Here she was, sharing her heart, her home, her memories, and he was keeping the most important truth from her. As evening approached, they gathered in the living room. Margaret had hung stockings on the mantel, one for each of them. The sight of them, arranged like a real family's would be, made Ethan's throat tight. I have something for you, Margaret said suddenly, rising from her armchair. She disappeared into her bedroom and returned with a small wooden box. It's not much, she said, settling back down, but I've been wanting to give you this. She opened the box and carefully lifted out a men's wristwatch. The leather band was worn but well cared for, the face classic and dignified. This belonged to my Harold, she explained, her voice soft with memory. He wore it every day of our marriage until he passed. She held it out to Ethan. It suits a man who works hard for his family. Ethan's hands trembled as he accepted the watch. The weight of it felt impossibly heavy, not just the physical weight, but the history it carried, the meaning behind it. This was his grandfather's watch, the grandfather he'd never known he had. I can't accept this, he stammered. But Margaret shook her head firmly. Please, she said. It needs to be worn again, to be useful. She smiled, her eyes misty. Harold would have liked you, Ethan. You remind me so much of. She trailed off, then patted his hand. Well, you're a good man. That's what matters. Ethan swallowed hard against the emotion, threatening to overwhelm him. He slipped the watch onto his wrist, feeling the smooth leather against his skin. Another piece of his unknown heritage. Another connection to the family he'd never known he had. Thank you, he managed, the words feeling wholly inadequate. Lily climbed into his lap, examining the watch with curious fingers. It's pretty, Daddy, she said, then yawned widely. Someone's ready for bed, Margaret observed with a gentle smile. It's getting late anyway. Santa will be coming soon. As they gathered their things to leave, the Christmas tree lights twinkled softly, casting warm shadows on the walls. The stockings hung expectantly, waiting for tomorrow. Everything felt perfect, and terribly, achingly fragile. The watch ticked steadily against Ethan's wrist as he helped Lily with her coat, each second marking time in a story he wasn't sure how to tell. The cardboard boxes in Ethan's cramped attic seemed to multiply before his eyes, each one a dusty monument to years of accumulated life. Dust motes swirled and danced in the weak January sunlight that struggled through the small, grimy window, catching the light like tiny spirits as they made him sneeze repeatedly. He rubbed his nose with the back of his sleeve and continued sorting through the endless stacks of paperwork, receipts, and forgotten documents. His W-2 forms had to be buried in here somewhere among the chaos. Tax season was bearing down on him like a freight train, and he desperately needed every deduction, every credit, every penny he could legally claim. The attic floor creaked under his weight as he shifted position, his knees already protesting from kneeling on the rough wooden planks. The space felt even smaller today, cramped and suffocating, with barely enough room for a grown man to move around without bumping his head on the slanted ceiling. "Daddy?" Lily's sweet voice drifted up from downstairs, floating through the house like a gentle melody. "Can I go play at Grandma Maggie's? She said she wanted to show me how to make those sugar cookies with the little sprinkles on top." Ethan paused mid-reach for another box, his heart doing that familiar squeeze it always did whenever he heard Lily call Margaret Grandma. The word carried such innocent trust, such pure affection. It never failed to remind him of the complicated web of truth and secrets that surrounded their little makeshift family. "Not right now, sweetie," he called back, trying to keep the exhaustion out of his voice. "I need to finish this mess first. Maybe after lunch, okay?" He heard her dramatic sigh echo through the house, the kind only a 7-year-old could perfect, followed immediately by the familiar sounds of Saturday morning cartoons flickering to life on their old television set. The cheerful voices of animated characters seemed to mock his current predicament. Turning back to the overwhelming task at hand, he dragged another box closer to his makeshift workspace. This one was different from the others, marked Dad's Things in his own hurried, grief-stricken handwriting from 5 years ago. The black marker had faded to a dull gray, but the words still cut deep. He hadn't opened this particular box since that awful week after the funeral, when he'd numbly packed away his father's belongings with shaking hands and a heart full of unprocessed grief. His fingers hesitated now on the worn cardboard flaps, suddenly reluctant to disturb whatever memories lay sleeping inside. The tape pulled away with a soft ripping sound that seemed too loud in the quiet attic. Inside, familiar items stirred a kaleidoscope of memories. His father's favorite coffee mug, the blue ceramic one with the tiny chip on the handle that he'd refused to throw away. A dog-eared Bible with countless bookmarks and highlighted passages. Some old utility bills and bank statements. A handful of loose photographs curled at the edges. Each item was a small piece of the man who'd raised him alone after his mother died, working double shifts and sacrificing everything to give Ethan a chance at a better life. At the very bottom of the box, beneath a carefully folded stack of yellowed newspapers his father had saved for reasons Ethan never understood, lay something unexpected. A cream-colored envelope, elegant and formal, with the kind of thick paper stock that spoke of care and importance. The address was written in the most beautiful cursive handwriting he'd ever seen. Mr. Michael Hayes Sr. Ethan's breath caught in his throat like a physical thing. His hands trembled slightly as he turned the envelope over, studying every detail. The return address made his heart stop completely. It showed Margaret's name, though at a different house number than where she lived now. The postmark, faded but still legible, was from 15 years ago. Most shocking of all, the envelope had never been opened. The seal remained intact, unbroken, as if waiting all these years for someone to discover its secrets. His mind raced as he stared at the letter. How had this ended up with his father's things? Why had it never been opened? His father had moved several times over the years. Maybe it had been forwarded, misdelivered, somehow lost in the shuffle of addresses and postal transfers. His fingers trembled as he carefully worked at the aged seal, trying not to damage the delicate paper. The adhesive had grown brittle with time, crackling softly as it gave way. Inside, a single sheet of paper was folded with mathematical precision, the same cream color as the envelope. The paper felt expensive under his fingertips, substantial and real. He unfolded it slowly, reverently, and began to read the words written in that same elegant cursive script. "My dearest Michael, I know you probably won't read this letter, just like all the others. Every piece of mail I've sent over these past 3 years has come back to me unopened, returned to sender with those awful red stamps that feel like slaps across my face. But I keep writing anyway. Keep hoping that maybe someday you'll forgive me enough to hear what I desperately need to say. I was wrong about everything, son. Wrong about the way I treated you after your father died. Wrong about trying to control every aspect of your life when you were already a grown man. Wrong about the cruel, unforgivable things I said when you told me you were moving away with Sarah to start your new life. A mother should be her son's biggest supporter, his safe harbor in storms. not the one who crushes his dreams with her own fears and stubborn pride. The house echoes with emptiness now. Every footstep sounds hollow. Every room feels too big and too quiet. I dust your bedroom every single week, moving around your belongings like they're precious relics, but I haven't changed a single thing. Your model airplanes still hang from the ceiling on their fishing line, catching the light when the afternoon sun slants through your window. Do you remember how you used to lie in that narrow bed for hours, staring up at them and making up elaborate stories about flying to exotic, far-off places? You had such an imagination, such beautiful dreams. I should have encouraged that adventurous spirit instead of trying so hard to clip your wings and keep you close to home. Last Sunday at church, I saw a young father walking up the front steps, holding his little boy's hand so gently, so protectively. The child looked just like you did at that age. The same stubborn cowlick, the same bright eyes, full of curiosity about everything. I couldn't stop the tears from coming, right there in front of everyone. The ladies from my prayer group surrounded me with their good intentions, trying to offer comfort with gentle pats and whispered reassurances. But how could I possibly explain? How do you tell people that you drove away your only child, your greatest blessing, because you were too proud and too stubborn to simply say, "I'm sorry"? I miss you with every breath I take, Michael. I miss your infectious laugh that could fill up this whole house with joy. I miss your silly jokes and the way you'd whistle old hymns while helping me plant vegetables in the garden each spring. I even miss our arguments. At least when we were fighting, we were still talking, still connected. This terrible silence between us is more unbearable than any disagreement we ever had. If you're reading this letter, if you finally found it in your heart to open just one envelope from your foolish mother, please know that I pray for you every single day. I pray that you're happy wherever you are, that you found the peace and sense of purpose I was too blind and too frightened to see you needed. I pray that Sarah loves you the way you deserve to be loved, and that together you're building the kind of life you always dreamed about. Most of all, I pray that someday, maybe not today, maybe not this year, but someday you might find it in your generous heart to forgive a stubborn old woman who forgot that love should always be stronger than pride. Your room is still here, exactly as you left it. My door is still open, and it always will be. There's a place at my table, a chair by the fireplace, a space in my heart that belongs only to you. With all my love and my deepest, most heartfelt regrets, Mom. Ethan lowered the letter with shaking hands, his vision blurring as tears spilled down his cheeks unchecked. He wiped his eyes with the back of his sleeve, but more tears kept coming. His father had never seen these words. He'd never known the depth of his mother's regret, never understood how desperately she'd longed for reconciliation. This letter, with its message of love and forgiveness, had somehow ended up mixed in with random paperwork and forgotten belongings. Its healing words lost to time and circumstance. The weight of it hit him like a physical blow. All those years, Margaret had been carrying this burden of guilt and sorrow, believing her son had rejected her completely. And his father, his gentle, kind father who'd spoken of his mother only in the vaguest terms, had never known she'd been trying to reach him, trying to bridge the gap that pride and stubbornness had created. He thought about Margaret now, the woman who'd become such an unexpected blessing in their lives. He could picture her in her kitchen at this very moment, probably setting out ingredients for another batch of cookies, humming softly to herself as she worked. He thought about the way she lit up whenever Lily ran to her with scraped knees or exciting news about school. He remembered how she'd carefully prepared the guest room, fluffing pillows and arranging fresh flowers, just in case someone needs it, never quite able to admit she was hoping they might stay. All these years, she'd been living with this crushing weight of regret, trying to atone for a past she couldn't change, longing for a family she believed was lost forever. She'd been practicing grandmother love on Lily, pouring all her unused maternal energy into caring for a child who wasn't even her blood relative. Except she was. Lily was her great-granddaughter, and Ethan was the grandson she'd never known existed. The attic suddenly felt impossibly small and cramped, too crowded with the ghosts of missed opportunities and the heavy presence of secrets that begged to be revealed. Ethan carefully refolded the letter along its original creases, treating it like the precious artifact it was, and slipped it back into its envelope with reverent hands. His eyes fell on his father's old Bible, its leather cover worn smooth by years of faithful reading. He picked it up, running his fingers over the familiar texture, feeling the slight indentations where his father's hands had gripped it during countless quiet mornings. The pages fell open naturally to Psalms, revealing his father's careful notes in the margins and verses, highlighted in faded yellow. "You already have your second chance, Grandma," he whispered to the dusty air, his voice thick with emotion as he gently placed the letter back in the box next to the Bible. "You just don't know it yet." The house creaked around him, settling into its old bones, as Ethan sat in the January sunlight and contemplated the mysterious ways that grace sometimes worked in the world. Downstairs, Lily's laughter mixed with cartoon music, the sound of innocent joy that somehow made everything seem possible again. "The green bean casserole needs more salt," Margaret fretted, lifting the ceramic dish from her oven. The warm, savory smell filled her kitchen as she adjusted her apron. She turned to Ethan and Lily, who were sitting at her kitchen table. "Are you sure you don't mind coming to the church potluck? I know it's last minute." "We'd love to," Ethan said, watching Lily swing her legs under the chair. "Right, sweetheart. Will there be dessert?" Lily asked, her eyes bright with hope. Margaret chuckled, the corners of her eyes crinkling. "Mrs. Peterson always brings her famous apple pie, and I heard Sister Mary is bringing chocolate chip cookies." The evening air was crisp as they walked the short distance to the church, Margaret carrying her casserole while Ethan held Lily's hand. The church windows glowed warmly against the darkening sky, and the sounds of laughter and conversation spilled out onto the sidewalk. Inside the church basement, long tables sagged under the weight of countless dishes. The room hummed with conversation and the clinking of silverware. Pastor John stood near the entrance, greeting everyone with a warm smile. "Margaret," he called out, "and the Coles too. What a wonderful surprise." Lily tugged at the pastor's sleeve. "Grandma Maggie made green beans." Pastor John's eyes softened as he looked between Margaret and Ethan. "Grandma Maggie, is it?" he said quietly. Margaret's cheeks flushed pink as she set down her casserole. "Oh, she just started calling me that. I don't mind." They found seats at one of the long tables, Lily between them. The wooden chairs scraped against the linoleum floor as people settled in for the meal. Pastor John stood at the front of the room, tapping his water glass with a spoon to get everyone's attention. "Before we begin our meal," he said, his voice carrying across the room, "I'd like to take a moment to thank God for the wonderful ways He works in our community." He paused, smiling. "And I particularly want to acknowledge the beautiful friendship that's grown between Margaret Hayes and the Cole family. It's a reminder that God brings people together in His perfect timing." Ethan felt his face grow warm as heads turned their way. Margaret reached across Lily to pat his hand, her eyes misty. After the blessing, plates were filled and conversation flowed freely. Lily charmed everyone nearby with her stories about helping Margaret in the garden, even though it was winter and nothing was growing yet. When the meal was winding down, Pastor John invited anyone who wished to share a testimony. Margaret slowly stood up, smoothing her skirt with trembling hands. She began, her voice quavering slightly. "I've been alone for so many years. After I lost my husband, and then, after my son left, I thought that was God's plan for me, to live with my mistakes." She took a deep breath. "But then, on an ordinary day at the grocery store, God sent me an angel. 2 angels, actually." She smiled down at Lily, who beamed back. "Ethan and Lily have brought light back into my life," Margaret continued, her voice growing stronger. "They've shown me that family isn't just about blood. It's about love and grace and second chances." She dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. "I thought I was too old for new beginnings, but God had other plans." Ethan's throat felt tight as he listened. He could barely swallow past the lump that had formed there. Beside him, Lily slipped her small hand into his and squeezed. After the testimonies, people began to clean up and head home. The moon was bright overhead as they walked back, their breath visible in the cold air. Lily skipped ahead, hunting for interesting shadows on the sidewalk. Ethan's heart pounded. The words were right there, on the tip of his tongue. "Margaret, there's something I need to tell you." But just then, Lily ran back and grabbed his hand. "Daddy," she said, looking up at Margaret's peaceful face. "She's happy again." The words died in his throat. Margaret was humming softly as she walked, a gentle smile on her face. For now, maybe that was enough. They reached Margaret's house, its porch light casting a warm glow on the snow. Lily hugged Margaret's legs tightly. "Thank you for the cookies, Grandma Maggie." "You're welcome, sweetheart," Margaret said, stroking Lily's hair. "Thank you both for coming. It meant so much to have you there." As they turned to leave, Margaret called after them. "See you Sunday?" "Of course," Ethan replied, his voice rough with emotion. "We wouldn't miss it." The morning sun streamed through Margaret's kitchen windows, casting warm patches on her yellow checkered tablecloth. She hummed softly as she arranged fresh-baked cookies on a plate, her silver hair neatly pinned back, wearing her favorite powder blue cardigan. "Are you sure it's not too much trouble?" Ethan asked from the doorway, adjusting his tie. He looked different in his interview clothes, younger somehow, despite the worry lines around his eyes. "Nonsense," Margaret waved away his concern. "I've been wanting to spend more time with this little angel." She smiled at Lily, who was already reaching for a cookie. "Besides, what else would I do today? Watch more television?" Ethan knelt down to Lily's level, straightening her pink sweater. "Be good for Miss Margaret, okay? I'll be back in a few hours." "Okay, Daddy." Lily wrapped her arms around his neck, cookie crumbs dusting his shoulder. "Good luck at your interview." Margaret watched them embrace, her heart warming at their tender goodbye. These moments reminded her of Michael when he was young. Before everything went wrong, she pushed the painful thought away and focused on the present. After Ethan left, Margaret and Lily settled into a comfortable routine. They watered the houseplants together, with Lily carefully carrying her little watering can. They played with Margaret's collection of old board games, and Lily showed off her reading skills with a picture book from her backpack. "Would you like to help me make lunch?" Margaret asked, checking the clock. It was nearly noon. "Yes!" Lily jumped up, accidentally knocking her backpack off the chair. Its contents spilled across the hardwood floor, crayons rolling in every direction, papers fluttering like leaves. "Oh dear," Margaret said, bending down to help gather everything. "Let's get this cleaned up." As she collected the scattered items, her hand brushed against a folded document. The paper was official-looking, creased from being carried around. Without thinking, she opened it to make sure it wasn't something important that Ethan might need for his interview. The words, "Certificate of Birth," stood out at the top in bold letters. Margaret's eyes moved automatically to the details below, and suddenly the world seemed to tilt on its axis. Father's name, Michael James Hayes. Mother's name, Sarah Elizabeth Cole. Child's name, Ethan Michael Cole. The paper trembled in her hands. She read it again and again, each time feeling like she'd been struck in the chest. Michael, her Michael, the son she'd pushed away, the one she'd lost to pride and anger, he was Ethan's father. "Miss Margaret?" Lily's voice seemed to come from very far away. "Are you okay?" Margaret's vision blurred with tears. She tried to speak but couldn't find her voice. All this time, Ethan had known. He'd come to her house that first day with banana bread, sat at her table, fixed her porch, all while knowing he was her grandson, her own flesh and blood. The weight of it crushed her heart. Every shared meal, every conversation about faith and family, every time she'd accidentally called him son, it hadn't been an accident at all. He was her grandson, and he hadn't told her. "Your eyes are leaking," Lily said softly, touching Margaret's arm. "Do you need a tissue?" Margaret nodded, unable to speak. She clutched the birth certificate as Lily ran to get the tissue box from the side table. Memories flooded back. The day Michael left, their last bitter argument, the years of silence that followed. And now, here was proof that her son had built a life without her, had a family she never knew about. She thought of all the moments she'd missed. Michael's wedding, Ethan's birth, watching him grow up. The grief of those lost years crashed over her anew, mixed with a fresh pain. The betrayal of Ethan's silence. Why hadn't he told her? Was it revenge for how she treated Michael? Or worse, was he just being kind to a lonely old woman out of pity? "Here." Lily offered the tissue box, her small face creased with concern. "Thank you, dear," Margaret managed, her voice barely above a whisper. She wiped her eyes, trying to compose herself for Lily's sake, but her hands wouldn't stop shaking. The rest of the afternoon passed in a fog. Margaret went through the motions of making lunch, but she couldn't eat. She answered Lily's chatter with automatic responses, her mind spinning with questions and accusations. When Ethan returned, flushed with hope from a successful interview, Margaret couldn't meet his eyes. She mumbled something about feeling unwell and practically pushed them out the door, ignoring Ethan's concerned questions. Later that night, Margaret sat alone in her dimly lit dining room. The house felt colder somehow, emptier. She pulled out an old cedar chest from her bedroom and lifted out a carefully wrapped bundle, a baby quilt she'd made decades ago. When she first learned Michael's wife was expecting, the morning sun cast long shadows across Margaret's front yard as Ethan's truck pulled up to the curb. He stepped out holding a pink bakery box, his work boots crunching on the frozen grass. The donuts inside were still warm, and he smiled, thinking how Lily had insisted on the ones with rainbow sprinkles. His breath formed little clouds in the crisp air as he walked up the familiar path to Margaret's porch. Something felt different today. The usual warmth that radiated from her home seemed dimmed, like a light switched off. The porch swing he'd recently fixed hung motionless in the winter air. Ethan knocked on the door, adjusting his worn jacket. "Margaret, it's Ethan. Brought us some breakfast." The door opened slowly. Margaret stood there, her usual gentle presence replaced by something rigid and cold. Her silver hair was pulled back severely, and her eyes, usually so kind, were hard as steel. "Come in," she said, her voice flat. She stepped aside, not meeting his gaze. Ethan's smile faltered as he entered. The house felt different too, colder somehow, despite the heat running. Margaret's Bible sat closed on the coffee table. Next to it lay a familiar piece of paper. His heart sank as he recognized his birth certificate. "Margaret, I can explain." "Can you?" Her voice cracked like thin ice. "Can you explain why you've been lying to me all this time?" Ethan set the donut box down carefully on the side table. "I wasn't lying. I only figured it out recently, when I saw the photo of Michael." "My son," Margaret cut in sharply. "Your father. The man you never once mentioned was my flesh and blood." She picked up the birth certificate with trembling hands. "I found this in Lily's backpack yesterday. Michael Hayes, right there in black and white. You knew. You must have known." "No, Margaret, please listen." Ethan stepped forward, but she backed away. "I only discovered it when I saw that photo on your mantle. I was trying to find the right way to tell you." "The right way?" Margaret's laugh was bitter. "There is no right way to hide something like this. Was it pity that brought you here, or were you hoping for something else?" The accusation stung like a physical blow. Ethan's face flushed with hurt and shame. "How can you think that? After everything we've shared? I don't know what to think anymore." Margaret's voice shook. "I opened my home to you, my heart. I thought God had sent me a second chance." "He did," Ethan said softly. "That's exactly what this is." "No." Margaret shook her head firmly. "This is manipulation. You let me pour out my grief about losing Michael, all while knowing you were his son. You watched me cry over my mistakes without saying a word, because I was scared." Ethan's voice rose despite himself. "I was scared of losing what we'd found here, you and Lily, the way you've become family to us." "Family?" Margaret's eyes flashed. "Family doesn't deceive each other. Family doesn't play games with the truth." She walked to the window, her back straight and stiff. The morning light caught the silver in her hair, reminding Ethan painfully of all the times she'd stood there watching them leave, waving until their truck disappeared around the corner. "I trusted you," she said quietly. "I thought God had sent me a kind young man and his precious daughter to heal my lonely heart. Instead, he sent me another reminder of my failures." "Margaret, please." "I already lost one son to lies," she said, her voice breaking. "I won't lose another." She turned to face him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "Please leave." Ethan stood frozen, the weight of her words pressing on his chest like a stone. All the moments they'd shared, the dinners, the prayers, Lily's laughter in the garden, seemed to crumble around him. "Margaret." He tried one last time. "Leave," she repeated, moving to open the front door. The winter air rushed in, sharp and unforgiving. Ethan walked slowly to the door, his feet heavy. He paused in the doorway, looking back at the woman who had become so much more than just a kind stranger from a grocery store. But Margaret wouldn't meet his eyes. The door closed behind him with a quiet click that echoed like thunder in his heart. The windshield wipers squeaked back and forth, pushing away the steady drizzle that had started during their drive home. Ethan gripped the steering wheel of his old pickup truck, his knuckles white against the worn leather. In the rearview mirror, he could see Lily curled up in her booster seat, her small head resting against the window as she slept peacefully, unaware of the storm brewing inside her father's heart. The late afternoon rain painted everything in shades of gray, matching his mood perfectly. Traffic lights reflected in puddles, blurring into watery stars on the wet pavement. Each stoplight felt like an eternity, as memories of Margaret's words echoed in his mind. "I already lost one son to lies. I won't lose another." A sob caught in his throat, surprising him. Ethan couldn't remember the last time he'd cried. Not even at his wife's funeral had he allowed himself this luxury. He'd always needed to be strong, to keep it together for Lily. But now, with his daughter sleeping soundly behind him and the rain masking his tears, something inside him finally broke. The tears came silently at first, then in waves that matched the rain outside. His shoulders shook as he pulled into their driveway, putting the truck in park but leaving the engine running. The rhythmic sound of the wipers and the patter of rain created a strange symphony for his grief. I'm sorry, Dad, he whispered to no one, thinking of his father, Margaret's son, and all the years of silence between them. I'm so sorry. A small stirring from the back seat made him quickly wipe his eyes with his sleeve. Daddy? Lily's voice was soft and sleepy. Are we home? Yeah, sweetie, he managed, his voice rough. We're home. Inside their small duplex, Lily's shoes squeaked on the linoleum floor as she hung up her wet coat. She watched her father with those observant eyes that sometimes seemed too wise for her 7 years. Ethan moved around the kitchen mechanically, pulling out mac and cheese for dinner, their comfort food. Daddy? Lily's small voice cut through the silence. Why isn't Grandma Maggie coming for dinner anymore? The box of pasta slipped from Ethan's hands, scattering macaroni across the floor. He braced himself against the counter, taking a deep breath. Sometimes grown-ups have disagreements, honey. Like when Jenny and me fought over the swing at recess? Lily asked, already on her knees, helping to pick up the spilled pasta. Ethan managed a weak smile. Something like that, but more complicated. Did you say sorry? It's not that simple, sweetheart. Why not? The innocent logic of a child cut straight to his heart. That evening, after a quiet dinner of slightly overcooked mac and cheese, Ethan sat on the edge of Lily's bed for their nightly prayers. The little girl knelt beside her bed, hands clasped tightly, her worn teddy bear tucked under one arm. Dear God, she began in her clear, sweet voice, please help Grandma Maggie and Daddy to stop hurting. They both look so sad, and I don't like it when people I love are sad. She paused, peeking up at Ethan with one eye. And please help them remember that saying sorry makes things better. Like when I said sorry to Jenny, and now we're best friends again. Ethan's throat tightened as he tucked her in, pressing a kiss to her forehead. Good night, princess. Later, alone in the living room, Ethan sat in his old armchair staring at the wall. The house felt emptier than usual, the silence heavier. He'd lost so much already. His wife, his steady job at the mechanic shop, his pride. And now, just when life had started feeling whole again, he'd lost Margaret too. The rain continued outside, a constant reminder of tears he couldn't seem to stop now that they'd started. He pulled out his wallet, removing a worn photograph of his father, Michael Hayes, taken when Ethan was just a baby. The resemblance between them was striking, especially around the eyes. No wonder Margaret had felt drawn to him from the start. Sleep eluded him that night. He tossed and turned, remembering Margaret's face in the grocery store that first day. Her kindness, her stories, the way she'd brought warmth back into their lives, the way Lily had bloomed under her attention, the way he'd finally felt like he belonged somewhere again. Morning came too soon, gray and cold. Ethan moved through their routine like a sleepwalker, making Lily's breakfast, helping her pack her backpack, driving her to school. His world felt like it was crumbling again, piece by piece. He'd just arrived at his part-time construction job when his phone rang. The school's number flashed on the screen, sending a jolt of anxiety through his chest. Mr. Cole? The school nurse's voice was concerned. You need to come pick up Lily. She's running a high fever. The emergency room's fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across Ethan's face as he paced the tile floor, his work boots squeaking with each turn. Lily's small form lay still in the hospital bed, her chest rising and falling in shallow breaths beneath a thin blanket. The heart monitor beeped steadily, its green line dancing across the screen like a silent metronome, counting the seconds of helpless waiting. Daddy? Lily's voice came out as a whisper, raspy and weak. Her usually bright eyes were glassy with fever. I'm right here, sweetheart. Ethan pulled his chair closer, taking her tiny hand in his. It felt too warm, like a cup of tea that hadn't cooled enough to drink. Try to rest. A nurse entered, her rubber-soled shoes silent on the floor. She checked Lily's vital signs and adjusted the IV drip with practiced efficiency. Her temperature's still high, but the antibiotics should start working soon, she said, offering Ethan a reassuring smile. The doctor will be in shortly. Ethan nodded, unable to find words. His throat felt tight, like someone had wrapped a belt around it and pulled. He watched as the nurse made notes on her clipboard and slipped back out into the bustling hallway. The doctor arrived 20 minutes later, his white coat crisp despite the late hour. Mr. Cole, he said, extending his hand. I'm Dr. Matthews. We've got the test results back. It's bacterial pneumonia. Ethan's stomach clenched. Is she? Will she be okay? She's stable, Dr. Matthews assured him, glancing at Lily's charts. We've started her on strong antibiotics. She's young and otherwise healthy, which works in her favor. But she'll need to stay here for a few days while we monitor her condition. Relief and worry wrestled in Ethan's chest. Thank you, doctor. After the doctor left, Ethan settled back into the uncomfortable plastic chair. The room felt too big, too empty. The walls, painted a pale mint green, seemed to stretch endlessly in the dim light. Outside the window, darkness had fallen, and rain continued to streak down the glass. "Our Father, who art in heaven." Ethan's whispered prayer filled the quiet room, his calloused hands clasped together so tight, his knuckles went white. "Please, Lord, please help my little girl." Hours passed like molasses. Nurses came and went. Lily drifted in and out of sleep, sometimes mumbling about Margaret's garden or the angel doll she'd left at home. Each time she mentioned Grandma Maggie, Ethan's heart twisted with fresh pain. Near midnight, a familiar figure appeared in the doorway. Pastor John, still wearing his raincoat, water dripping onto the floor. "I came as soon as I heard," he said softly, pulling up another chair. "How is she?" "Pneumonia," Ethan managed, his voice rough. "They say she's stable, but..." He gestured helplessly at the monitors and tubes. Pastor John placed a warm hand on Ethan's shoulder. "The Lord hasn't brought you this far to leave you now, son." They sat in companionable silence for a while, watching Lily sleep. The pastor's presence felt like a sturdy anchor in the storm of worry and fear. "Have you called Margaret?" Pastor John asked finally, his voice gentle. Ethan shook his head, pain flashing across his features. "She doesn't, after what happened. Sometimes pride keeps us from the very people we need most," the pastor said. "And sometimes it's fear that wears pride's mask." Before Ethan could respond, a nurse came to check Lily's vitals again. Pastor John stood, squeezing Ethan's shoulder one more time. "I'll stop by Margaret's on my way home. She should know." Across town, Margaret sat alone in her living room, a handmade quilt spread across her lap. Her fingers traced the careful stitching, tiny boats and anchors she'd sewn decades ago for a grandson she'd never met. Until now. The doorbell rang, startling her from her thoughts. Through the window, she could see Pastor John's familiar silhouette on her porch, rain dripping from his hat brim. "John," she said, opening the door. "What brings you out in this weather?" "It's Lily," he said simply. "She's in the hospital with pneumonia. Ethan's there now." Margaret's hand flew to her throat. "How is she?" "She's stable, but sick. They're keeping her for observation." He paused, studying her face. That little girl could use her grandmother's prayers right now. After the pastor left, Margaret sank into her armchair, the quilt still clutched in her arms. The clock ticked loudly in the silence. Outside, the rain continued to fall, a steady drumming against the roof. Her eyes fell on the family photos lining her mantel, snapshots of a life marked by love and loss. The empty spaces between the frames seemed to echo with missed opportunities, with words left unsaid. "Oh Lord," she whispered, tears sliding down her cheeks. "What have I done?" Standing slowly, Margaret folded the quilt with trembling hands. She found a paper bag in the kitchen and carefully placed the quilt inside. The clock showed just past midnight as she stood in her entryway, purse in one hand, paper bag in the other. Looking at her reflection in the hall mirror, she saw not just her own face, but echoes of her son Michael, of Ethan, of little Lily, family. The words seemed to pulse with new meaning. "It's time," she whispered, reaching for her car keys. The hospital corridor lights dimmed for the night shift, casting a soft glow through the window of Lily's room. Ethan slumped in the uncomfortable plastic chair beside her bed, his eyes heavy but refusing to close completely. The steady rhythm of the heart monitor marked time in the quiet space, mixing with the gentle hiss of oxygen flowing through Lily's nasal tube. His daughter's chest rose and fell in shallow breaths, her face still flushed with fever. The white hospital sheet seemed to swallow her small frame, making her appear even more fragile than usual. A children's book lay open but unread on his lap. He'd tried reading to her earlier, but his voice had failed him. Ethan's hand rested on Lily's arm, his thumb making small, comforting circles on her skin. His other hand absently fingered the old wristwatch Margaret had given him for Christmas, its familiar weight now a reminder of everything that had fallen apart. The clock on the wall showed 11:42 p.m., another endless night of worry stretching ahead. The soft squeak of rubber-soled shoes in the hallway barely registered in his exhausted mind. But when the door whispered open, something made him look up. There in the doorway stood Margaret Hayes, her silver hair slightly disheveled, clutching a paper bag to her chest. She wore her Sunday church dress, as if she'd been too distracted to change, and her eyes were red-rimmed behind her glasses. For a moment, neither of them moved or spoke. Ethan slowly rose from his chair, his joints stiff from sitting so long. "Margaret?" His voice came out hoarse, barely above a whisper. She took a hesitant step into the room, her gaze moving from him to Lily's sleeping form. "The pastor told me," she said softly. I couldn't stay away." The air between them felt thick with unspoken words. Ethan's hands hung awkwardly at his sides, unsure whether to reach out or maintain distance. "I'm sorry," he managed. "I should have told you sooner about everything." Margaret shook her head, tears gathering in her eyes. "No, I'm the one who's sorry. I let my pride, my hurt, I did it again, just like with Michael." Her voice caught on his father's name. She moved closer to Lily's bed, setting the paper bag on the side table with trembling hands. From it, she withdrew a carefully folded quilt, its fabric soft with age, but still beautiful in its intricate patterns of blues and creams. "I made this," Margaret said, her voice thick with emotion, "when I found out Michael and his wife were expecting for my grandson." She looked at Ethan, really looked at him, as if seeing him clearly for the first time. "For you." With gentle movements, she unfolded the quilt and laid it over Lily's sleeping form. The fabric settled like a blessing, bringing warmth to the sterile hospital room. "I made this for you before you were even born," she whispered. Ethan's vision blurred as he watched her tuck the quilt around Lily with grandmother's care. The weight of years, of loss and misconnections, of silence and regret, seemed to fill the small room. But something else filled it too. Hope, as fragile and precious as his daughter's breathing. Margaret's hand found his in the dim light. Her grip was warm and sure, despite her age. "Would you pray with me?" she asked. "For Lily?" Ethan nodded, unable to speak. They joined hands beside Lily's bed, forming a circle of family that had been broken for too long. Margaret's soft voice carried the prayer, words of healing and forgiveness flowing together as naturally as a stream. The monitors beeped steadily, marking the rhythm of their shared vigil. Outside the window, snow began to fall, each flake a silent witness to this moment of reconciliation. The quilt, crafted with a grandmother's love decades ago, finally served its purpose, warming not just Lily's sleep, but the hearts of those who watched over her. Morning sunlight crept through the hospital room's Venetian blinds, painting thin stripes of gold across Lily's pale face. The steady beep of monitors filled the quiet room where Ethan and Margaret had kept their vigil through the night, neither wanting to leave the sleeping child's side. Margaret's quilt, lovingly crafted decades ago, wrapped Lily in its warmth, each patch telling a story of hope deferred, now finally finding its intended purpose. The fabric was soft with age, its colors muted but beautiful, like memories preserved in an old photograph. Ethan sat with his elbows on his knees, his work-worn hands clasped in silent prayer. Margaret remained in her chair on the opposite side of the bed, her silver hair catching the early light. Between them lay Lily, their bridge across years of loss and misunderstanding. A small movement caught their attention. Lily's fingers twitched against the quilt, and her eyelashes fluttered. Both adults leaned forward, hearts racing with anticipation and concern. Slowly, Lily's eyes opened, still heavy with sleep but clearer than they had been the day before. For a moment, she simply blinked at the ceiling, getting her bearings in the unfamiliar room. Then her gaze drifted to her right, where Margaret sat holding her breath. A weak but genuine smile spread across Lily's face, lighting up her tired features. "Grandma," she whispered, her voice scratchy but full of joy. "You came!" Margaret's composed facade crumbled at those simple words. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she reached for Lily's small hand. "Oh, my precious girl," she managed between quiet sobs. "Of course I came. I'm so sorry I stayed away." Ethan watched the scene unfold, his own eyes growing misty. The sight of his daughter's unconditional love breaking through the walls of hurt and pride moved something deep within him. He saw Margaret not as the woman who had pushed his father away, but as someone who had carried that regret for 20 years, someone who was now being offered a chance at healing through the pure heart of a child. "Margaret," he said softly, his voice thick with emotion. She looked up at him, her face streaked with tears, vulnerability raw in her expression. "We both lost years we can't get back." He swallowed hard, choosing his next words carefully. "Let's not lose today." Margaret nodded, unable to speak. She reached across Lily's bed with her free hand, and Ethan took it without hesitation, their fingers intertwined. Grandmother and grandson, connected at last across the divide of time and circumstance. Lily watched them with heavy-lidded eyes, her smile never fading. The medication in her system began to pull her back toward sleep, but she fought it for a moment longer. "Now we're a real family," she murmured, her words slurring slightly. Margaret squeezed her hand gently. Yes, sweetheart, we are. The quilt is so pretty, Lily said, her fingers tracing the patterns weakly. It feels like a hug. I made it for your daddy before he was born, Margaret explained softly, smoothing a wrinkle in the fabric. I've been keeping it safe all these years, waiting for the right moment to give it to him, and now it's keeping you warm instead. Ethan touched the quilt reverently, understanding the years of love and longing stitched into every seam. Each patch represented a prayer, a hope, a dream for the grandson she never knew. Now those prayers were being answered in ways none of them could have imagined. Lily's eyes began to drift closed, her body relaxing into the peaceful sleep of healing. Her grip on Margaret's hand loosened, but neither adult pulled away. They remained connected, watching over their precious child as the morning light grew stronger, casting away the shadows of the night and of the past. The sound of Lily's steady breathing filled the room, accompanied by the rhythmic beeping of monitors that now seemed less intrusive and more like a lullaby. Margaret and Ethan sat in comfortable silence, no longer strangers or adversaries, but family, bound together by love for the little girl who had brought them full circle. Through the window, they could hear birds greeting the new day, their songs mixing with the quiet hospital sound. Lily slept peacefully between them, wrapped in the warmth of her grandmother's quilt and surrounded by the love of her newly united family. A few days had passed since that emotional night in the hospital. The winter sun streamed through Lily's hospital room window, warming the cheerful get-well cards that now decorated her bedside table. The steady beeping of monitors had become background noise, less urgent than before. Margaret pushed open the door with her hip, carefully balancing a thermos of homemade chicken soup in one hand and her worn leather purse in the other. Her silver hair caught the morning light, and her eyes sparkled with determination. "Good morning, sweetheart," she called softly to Lily, who was propped up against her pillows, some color finally returning to her cheeks. Ethan looked up from the chair, where he'd been reading a children's book aloud. Dark circles shadowed his eyes from nights of worried watching, but a small smile touched his lips. "Right on time with the soup. A grandmother's timing is never wrong," Margaret said, setting down her things. She poured the steaming soup into a bowl, the aroma of herbs and chicken filling the sterile room. "My mother's recipe. She swore it could cure anything." Lily sat up straighter, eager for something other than hospital food. "Did your mommy make it for my daddy's daddy too?" A heavy silence fell. Margaret's hands stilled for a moment, then resumed their careful movements. "Yes, she did. Michael loved this soup when he was sick." Her voice grew soft with memory. "He used to beg for seconds, even with a fever." Ethan watched his grandmother's face, seeing the mixture of joy and pain there. "What else did he like when he was young?" Margaret settled into the chair opposite Ethan, smoothing her skirt. "Oh, he was always climbing trees. Gave me such frights. But he loved being up high. Said he could see forever from the top branches." She chuckled softly. "Your grandfather tried to build him a treehouse once. It was a disaster. Neither of them knew the first thing about carpentry. Like father, like son," Ethan admitted with a sheepish grin. "I tried to build Lily a dollhouse last Christmas. It looked more like modern art when I finished." They shared a laugh, and something tight in both their chests loosened a little more. As Lily ate her soup, Margaret reached into her purse and pulled out a small photo album. I thought you might like to see these." Her fingers trembled slightly as she handed it to Ethan. He opened it carefully. The first photo showed a young boy with unruly dark hair, his father, grinning at the camera, missing his front teeth. "That's Michael at 8, Margaret finished. He'd just lost both front teeth in 1 week and was so proud. She leaned closer, pointing to another picture. "And here he is at your age, Lily, dressed as a shepherd in the church Christmas pageant. He forgot all his lines and made up new ones about the sheep being too itchy." Lily giggled, soup forgotten. "Did he get in trouble?" "Oh no," Margaret smiled. "Everyone thought it was so funny they kept his version the next year." They spent the next hour going through photos, Margaret's stories flowing easier with each page turn. Stories of Michael's first bicycle ride, his favorite hiding spots in the house, the time he painted the cat blue with watercolors. With each memory shared, the invisible wall between grandmother and grandson crumbled a little more. Around noon, while Lily napped, Ethan suggested they visit the hospital chapel. Margaret nodded, understanding the need for quiet reflection. The chapel was small but peaceful, with soft light filtering through stained glass windows. Wooden pews gleamed with years of use, and a simple cross hung on the front wall. Margaret moved slowly to the prayer candles, Ethan following behind. She selected a candle, lighting it with careful movements. The tiny flame flickered to life, joining others in their quiet vigil. "For Michael," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "My beautiful, stubborn boy." She touched the cross hanging at her neck. "I spent so many years being angry at him for leaving, and then angry at myself for driving him away. But now," Ethan placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, "he would be happy to see us here together." Margaret covered his hand with her own, tears sliding down her cheeks. "You have his heart, you know, that same gentleness. I see it in how you care for Lily." She turned to face him fully. "I'm so sorry I doubted your intentions. Pride, it's a terrible thing. It cost me 20 years with my son. I couldn't bear to lose his son, too." They sat together in the front pew, the candles' flame dancing in the quiet air. Margaret's shoulders shook with silent tears as she looked up at the cross. "Thank you, Lord," she whispered, her voice barely audible, "for bringing his son back to me." Ethan reached for her hand, and they sat in peaceful silence, letting the chapel's tranquility wash over them. The weight of unspoken words and lost years began to lift, replaced by the gentle promise of new beginning. The doctor signed the last of Lily's discharge papers with a flourish, handing them to Ethan with an encouraging smile. "She's made remarkable progress, Mr. Cole. Just make sure she gets plenty of rest for the next week or so." Lily sat on the edge of the hospital bed, her legs dangling as Margaret helped her tie her shoes. She wore her favorite purple sweater, the one Margaret had brought from home, and clutched the handmade quilt that hadn't left her side since that pivotal night. "Now remember," the doctor continued, "keep her warm, plenty of fluids, and follow up with your pediatrician in a week." Ethan nodded, folding the papers carefully and tucking them into his worn jacket pocket. His mind was already racing through logistics. Their small duplex would be cold, and the heating wasn't reliable. He'd need to pick up more medicine, and work had been understanding so far. "But you'll both stay with me, of course," Margaret announced, straightening up from Lily's shoes. Her tone was gentle but firm, the kind that brooked no argument. "That old house of mine is too big for just one person anyway." Ethan hesitated, his pride wrestling with practicality. "Margaret, we couldn't impose." "Impose?" Margaret's eyebrows rose. "Family doesn't impose, Ethan Cole. Besides," she added softly, "I've missed too many years already." A nurse arrived with a wheelchair, hospital policy for discharge, and Lily giggled as she climbed in, the quilt wrapped around her shoulders like a cape. "Can we, Daddy? Please?" Ethan looked at his daughter's hopeful face, then at Margaret's determined one. The walls he'd built around their little world of two had been crumbling ever since that day in the grocery store. Maybe it was time to let them fall completely. "All right," he conceded, managing a small smile. "Just until you're better, Lilybug." The drive to Margaret's house was quiet, peaceful. Lily dozed in the back seat of Ethan's pickup, while Margaret sat in the passenger seat, humming softly to the gospel music playing low on the radio. The winter sun painted everything in soft gold, and the snow along the roadside sparkled. Margaret's cottage looked different now, warmer, more inviting than when they'd first visited with banana bread what felt like a lifetime ago. The white picket fence welcomed them home, and Christmas lights still twinkled along the porch railing Ethan had fixed. "I made up the guest room," Margaret said as they helped Lily inside. "And the little room next to it. Well, I hope you don't mind, but I thought Lily might like it. It was Michael's room, once." Ethan's throat tightened at the mention of his father's name, but he managed a nod. Together, they settled Lily into the small bedroom, its walls a soft yellow, with shelves of old children's books and a handmade dollhouse in the corner. "Look, Daddy," Lily exclaimed, some of her old energy returning as she pointed to the window seat piled with cushions. "It's perfect for reading." That first evening set the tone for the days that followed. Margaret cooked dinner, real, home-cooked food that made their usual boxed meals seem a distant memory. The kitchen filled with the aroma of pot roast and fresh rolls, while Lily sat at the counter, carefully coloring a thank you card for her nurses. "More potatoes, Ethan?" Margaret asked, already spooning them onto his plate. "You're too thin. A working man needs his strength." "The food's amazing," he admitted, accepting the second helping. "I haven't had a meal like this since—" He stopped, remembering. "Since your wife," Margaret finished gently. "Tell me about her." And so he did, while Lily listened and added her own memories, and Margaret reached across the table to squeeze his hand. The kitchen seemed to hold them all, wrapped in warmth and understanding. Bedtime brought its own rituals. Margaret had found an old music box that played "Jesus Loves Me," and Lily insisted on hearing it every night. They would gather in her room, Ethan in the rocking chair, Margaret perched on the bed's edge, and Lily snuggled under the quilt that now permanently belonged on her bed. Will you tell me a story about Daddy when he was little? Lily asked Margaret one evening, her voice still slightly raspy but stronger each day. Oh, sweetheart, Margaret's eyes grew misty. I wish I could, but I'm making up for lost time now, aren't I? I can tell you about your grandfather, though, when he was a boy in this very room. The days blended together in a gentle rhythm. Lily grew stronger, color returning to her cheeks. She spent mornings by the window seat, reading from Margaret's collection of old books. In the afternoons, she would help Margaret bake cookies or sort through photo albums, asking questions about each faded picture. Ethan found himself relaxing too, shoulders loosening from their perpetual tension. He still went to work, but coming home, really coming home, to a warm house filled with family, was a gift he'd forgotten he could have. One evening, about a week after leaving the hospital, Ethan tucked Lily into bed. The music box played softly on the nightstand, and moonlight painted silver patterns on the yellow walls. Her favorite stuffed bear, a gift from Margaret, sat propped against the pillows. Lily yawned, burrowing deeper under her quilt. I like living here, she said sleepily, her eyes already closing. It feels like home. The first warm breeze of March swept through Margaret's backyard, carrying with it the promise of spring. Dead leaves from last autumn still cluttered the flower beds, and the garden tools lay rusted in the old shed. But hope bloomed in the soil's earthy scent. Ethan stood beside Margaret, both of them surveying the dormant garden. His sleeves were rolled up, revealing forearms tanned from outdoor work. Margaret wore her favorite gardening apron, faded but clean, with pockets full of seed packets. Your father loved this garden, Margaret said softly, kneeling to clear away some dead branches. Every spring, he'd beg me to plant lilies. Just one more patch, Mom, he'd say. Before I knew it, we had them everywhere. Ethan smiled, imagining a young Michael Hayes on his knees in this same soil. What color were they? Oh, all kinds. Margaret's eyes lit up with the memory. But his favorites were the orange ones with dark spots. Tiger lilies, they're called. He said they looked like tiny sunsets. From inside the house came the sound of small feet pattering downstairs. Lily appeared at the back door, still in her pajamas despite the late morning hour. She'd been sleeping better lately, her strength returning day by day. Can I help? She called out, pressing her nose against the screen door. Get dressed first, honey, Ethan answered, and put on your old shoes. It's muddy out here. While they waited for Lily, Ethan tackled the shed. The door creaked open to reveal garden tools hanging on pegs, some dating back decades. He found the old swing set's chains coiled in a corner, still solid despite their age. I wondered where those went, Margaret said, appearing in the doorway. Michael used to spend hours on that swing. Said it helped him think. Ethan lifted the chains, testing their strength. I could fix it up. Lily would love it. Would you? Margaret's voice held a trace of wonder. It's been so long since I heard a child laughing in this yard. Lily joined them, wearing overalls and rubber boots decorated with rainbow patterns. Her dark hair was pulled back in two slightly uneven braids. She'd insisted on doing them herself lately. First, Margaret announced, holding up 3 pairs of gardening gloves. We need to clear the beds. Lily, would you like to learn how to tell the difference between weeds and flower stems? They worked through the morning, Margaret teaching as they went. She showed Lily how to grip weeds at their base, how to test soil moisture with her fingers, how to identify the first green shoots pushing through the earth. Look, Lily exclaimed, pointing to a cluster of tiny leaves. Something's already growing. Those are daffodils, Margaret explained. They're always first to wake up in spring. We'll plant the lilies near them. They bloom later when the daffodils are done. Ethan moved between helping them and working on the swing set. He'd found most of the original hardware in the shed, and the frame just needed cleaning and fresh paint. The rhythmic sound of his work provided a backdrop to Margaret and Lily's gardening lessons. By early afternoon, they'd cleared 3 flower beds. Margaret brought out sandwich plates and lemonade, setting them on the old picnic table. The spring sun warmed their shoulders as they ate. When will the lilies bloom? Lily asked, picking crusts off her bread. Late summer, Margaret replied. But good things are worth waiting for. Just like family. Ethan caught her eye across the table, understanding passing between them. These past weeks in Margaret's house had changed everything. What started as temporary shelter during Lily's recovery had grown into something deeper, more permanent. After lunch, they planted the lily bulbs. Margaret demonstrated the proper depth, measuring with her fingers. Not too deep, she instructed, but deep enough to feel secure. Lily copied her grandmother's movements carefully, tiny tongue poking out in concentration. She patted each mound of soil as if tucking the bulbs into bed. That's right, Margaret encouraged. They need gentle hands to grow strong. Ethan finished with the swing set as the afternoon waned. Fresh paint gleamed on the frame, and new seats hung from the restored chains. He gave them a test push, satisfaction warming his chest at the smooth motion. "All ready," he called out. "Want to try it, Lilybug?" Lily ran over, dirt still smudging her cheeks. Margaret helped her onto the seat, and Ethan gave a gentle push. Lily's delighted laugh rang through the yard, the same laugh that had echoed here decades ago when another child played in this garden. The first drops of rain caught them by surprise. Fat spring droplets began to fall, pattering on new leaves and freshly turned soil. Lily squealed and ran for the porch, but Ethan and Margaret lingered, watching the rain darken the earth where they'd planted new life. "Thank you," Margaret said quietly, her voice nearly lost in the soft rainfall, "for bringing my garden back to life, for bringing everything back to life." Ethan stood beside her, both of them sheltered by the old maple tree. Water dripped from its branches, but neither moved to leave. This moment felt too precious to break. "I never thought I'd have this again," Margaret continued. "A family, a reason to plant flowers and fix swings and bake cookies that disappear too fast." "Neither did I," Ethan admitted. "After losing Sarah, I thought Lily and I would always be alone." The rain fell steadily now, creating rivers of silver between the newly planted beds. Each drop seemed to whisper promises of growth, of renewal, of second chances blooming like lilies in summer Sunday. From the porch, Lily's voice called out, "Daddy, Grandma, you're getting all wet." They shared a smile, acknowledging the truth in her words, but still not moving. Sometimes, Ethan thought, the best moments came with a little rain. The afternoon sun streamed through Margaret's kitchen window, painting golden rectangles across the polished hardwood floor and casting a warm, honey-colored glow on the scattered photographs and letters spread across her sturdy oak dining table. She sat in her favorite chair, the one with the faded floral cushion that had molded to her form over countless years, fingers trembling as she traced the edges of a worn envelope she discovered among Ethan's belongings, while helping him move boxes into her spare room that morning. The envelope felt fragile between her weathered fingers, the paper soft and delicate from decades of careful storage. Her breath caught sharp in her throat when she recognized her own handwriting, those careful loops and curves she'd practiced as a schoolgirl, now spelling out Michael Hayes Sr. in faded blue ink. The paper had yellowed with age, edges slightly brown and brittle, but the words inside remained crisp and clear like wounds that never quite healed, no matter how much time passed. Margaret's heart hammered against her ribs as memories flooded back. She remembered the day she'd written this letter, sitting at this very table with tears streaming down her cheeks, pouring her broken heart onto paper, in hopes that somehow, someday, her words might bridge the chasm that had opened between mother and son. "Ethan?" she called out, her voice wavering slightly, barely above a whisper. She cleared her throat and tried again, louder this time. "Could you come here for a moment, dear?" Heavy footsteps creaked down the narrow hallway, the old floorboards groaning under his weight. Ethan appeared in the doorway, tall frame filling the entrance, wiping rich, dark garden dirt from his calloused hands with an old rag that had seen better days. His worn jeans were streaked with soil, and there was a smudge of earth on his forehead where he'd pushed back his hair. His expression softened immediately when he saw what she held, recognition flickering across his gentle features. "I found this while organizing your father's things," she said quietly, her voice barely steady. "I remember writing it, right after your grandfather passed. I was so lost then, so angry at the world." Ethan pulled out the chair beside her, the same chair his father had sat in as a boy, eating Margaret's homemade pancakes before school, and settled his long frame into it, close enough for their shoulders to touch. The familiar scent of honest work and spring air clung to him. "I found it tucked away in Dad's old things when I was going through his belongings after the funeral," he admitted, his voice thick with emotion. "I've been wanting to show you, but I wasn't sure how to bring it up without opening old wounds." Margaret's fingers trembled as she opened the envelope with infinite care, as if it contained something sacred. The paper inside crackled softly as she unfolded it, smoothing out the deep creases with hands that had aged but hadn't forgotten their gentle touch. The sound seemed to echo in the quiet kitchen, mixing with the distant melody of Lily's laughter drifting through the open window. She cleared her throat, adjusted her reading glasses that hung from a delicate gold chain, and began to read aloud, her voice growing stronger with each word. "Dearest Michael, I write this letter knowing you may never read these words, knowing that my pride has built a wall between us that seems impossible to tear down. But pride has kept me silent for too long, and now that your father has gone to be with the Lord, I can't bear the weight of unspoken words anymore. They're crushing me, son. I was wrong. so terribly, horribly wrong to let my grief over losing your father turn into anger toward you. When you told me you were leaving town with Sarah to start fresh, to build a life away from all this sadness, I should have embraced you both with joy. I should have celebrated your courage to choose love over sorrow. Instead, I let bitterness poison what should have been blessed. I let fear of being alone make me cruel to the one person I love most in this world. Margaret's voice cracked like ice on a warming pond. Ethan placed his strong, work-roughened hand over hers, steadying the shaking paper between them. His touch was warm and sure, exactly like his father's had been. I pray every day, she continued reading, fighting through tears that blurred the familiar words. Morning and night, on my knees beside this old bed, that God will grant me a second chance, that somehow, someday, through His infinite mercy, He'll bring you back to me. Or if not you, if my stubborn pride has cost me that forever, then perhaps your children, my grandchildren, I've never met but love with all my heart. I dream of them sometimes, in the quiet hours before dawn, wondering if they have your smile, or your father's kind eyes, wondering if they love to read like you did, or if they find joy in simple things like flowers blooming in spring. She paused, looking up at Ethan through tears that caught the afternoon light like prisms. His father's eyes, her son's gentle, thoughtful eyes looked back at her from his weathered but kind face, and she saw Michael as clearly as if he were sitting right there beside them. I've kept your room exactly as you left it, she read on, her voice gaining strength from the love poured into every word. The model planes you built so carefully still hang from the ceiling, turning slowly in the draft from the window. Your baseball trophies still shine on the shelf, and I polish them every week like you're coming home tomorrow. Your books are still arranged just how you like them. But what I miss most isn't any of those things. It's the sound of your laughter echoing through these empty halls. The way you used to hum while doing homework at this very table. The gentle way you'd kiss my cheek and say, "Good night, Mom," before heading up to bed. If you're reading this, please know that my door is always open, day or night, rain or shine. My heart is always open, no matter how much time has passed or how far you've traveled. I've learned, through pain and countless sleepless nights, that love is stronger than pride, and forgiveness is the greatest gift we can give or receive. It's the only thing that truly matters in this life. With all my love and my deepest, most sincere regrets, Mom. The kitchen fell into a profound silence, broken only by the gentle ticking of the old wall clock that had marked time through decades of joys and sorrows. Outside, they could hear Lily humming a sweet, wordless melody as she played in the garden, her innocent voice carrying through the open window like a reminder of life's constant capacity for renewal and hope. He never got to read it, Ethan said softly, his own voice thick with emotion. But God answered your prayer anyway, didn't He? He just took a different path to get here. A longer, more winding road than either of us could have imagined. Margaret pressed the letter to her chest, holding it close to her heart as years of accumulated guilt and longing flowed out through her tears, cleansing tears that felt like spring rain after a long, harsh winter. When I wrote those words about my grandchildren, she whispered, when I dreamed about them in the darkness, I never imagined. She reached out with her free hand and touched Ethan's weathered cheek with infinite tenderness. You have his smile, you know. That same gentle way of looking at the world that breaks your heart with its beauty. And Lily has your spirit, Ethan added, glancing toward the window where they could see the little girl's bright figure moving among the flower beds. The way she tends those flowers out there with such care and patience. That's all you, Margaret. That's your legacy living on. Margaret looked out the window at her granddaughter, who was carefully watering the newly planted lilies with a small watering can. Her movements deliberate and loving, the same flowers her son had loved so much as a boy, when he would help her in this very garden, his small hands dirty with soil and his face bright with wonder. The circle of life and love, broken for so long by pride and misunderstanding, had somehow found its way back to completion through grace and forgiveness. She stood slowly, her joints protesting after sitting for so long, and walked across the familiar kitchen to the old family Bible that rested on the credenza, the same Bible her mother had given her as a wedding gift, its leather cover worn smooth from years of faithful reading and countless hands that had turned its pages seeking comfort and wisdom. Opening it carefully to the book of Ruth, her favorite story of loyalty and redemption, she slipped the letter between its thin pages, where it would rest among the words of hope and promise that had sustained her through the darkest years. Grace never gets lost, she said, her voice steady now with newfound peace. It just takes time to find its way home, and sometimes it arrives in ways we never expected, wrapped in blessings we didn't know we needed. The warm May sunshine painted Margaret's backyard in streams of golden light that seemed to bless every corner of the transformed space. Lily's infectious laughter bubbled up from between the carefully tended rows of snow-white lilies, their pristine petals reaching toward heaven like countless open hands lifted in prayer. The garden had undergone a remarkable transformation over the past year, blooming and flourishing, much like the three precious lives that now called this weathered Victorian house their true home. Ethan stood at the well-used charcoal grill, black spatula steady in his calloused hand as he carefully monitored the sizzling hamburger patties. Gone was the faded, oil-stained work shirt from his desperate days of scrambling between odd jobs. In its place, he wore a crisp blue polo shirt with Henderson Auto Repair embroidered on the chest, a small but deeply meaningful symbol of just how far their little family had traveled from those dark days of uncertainty. The recent promotion to head mechanic had brought not just a steady paycheck, but the kind of financial stability they hadn't dared to dream of in years. "Daddy, look what I got!" Lily's voice rang out like church bells across the backyard as she bounded toward him, her blonde pigtails dancing with each excited step. In her small hands, she clutched her third-grade report card like a precious treasure. "All A's again. Mrs. Thompson said I'm her best student in math." Ethan's face lit up with the kind of pure parental pride that could power a small city. He carefully set the spatula down on the grill's side table and crouched to her level, opening his arms wide. "That's my brilliant girl," he said, his voice thick with emotion as he enveloped her in a bear hug that lifted her clean off the ground. "You know what? Why don't you run inside and show Grandma? She's been waiting to hear about your grades all week. And I know she'll want to put this right up on the refrigerator with all the others." The screen door creaked open with its familiar melody as Margaret emerged from the cool interior of the house, carefully balancing a large ceramic bowl of her famous potato salad, the recipe that had been passed down through 3 generations of Hayes women. Her silver hair was perfectly styled in soft waves that caught the afternoon light, and her eyes sparkled with the kind of deep contentment that comes only after a lifetime of hard-won wisdom. Around the neighborhood, word had spread about their monthly family barbecues, and what had started as a simple dinner for 3 had blossomed into a beloved tradition that now drew nearly half the congregation from Riverside Baptist Church. "Grandma Margaret," Lily practically launched herself across the patio, report card fluttering like a victory flag in her wake. "You have to see what I got in math. And spelling, and reading." Margaret's entire face transformed with joy as she quickly set down the potato salad on the nearest picnic table and knelt to examine the precious document. Her reading glasses, hanging from a delicate chain around her neck, perched on her nose as she studied each grade with the gravity of a Supreme Court justice. "Oh, my precious sweetheart," she exclaimed, her voice filled with wonder. "You're absolutely brilliant, just like your daddy was at your age." Smart as a whip and twice as determined, she paused, a mischievous twinkle dancing in her eyes. "You know what? This kind of achievement calls for something very special. But Grandma, it's not my birthday," Lily said, her brow furrowing with the kind of confusion that only children can manage when adults break the established rules of celebration. Margaret disappeared through the screen door with surprising speed for her 78 years, returning moments later with a small package wrapped in cheerful yellow paper and tied with a white satin ribbon. "Sometimes, my dear one, we celebrate simply because our hearts are so full of pride that they might just burst if we don't," she explained, settling back down to watch as Lily carefully peeled away the wrapping paper with the patience of someone who truly understands that anticipation makes every gift sweeter. Inside the package lay a brand new set of 64 colored pencils in every shade imaginable, complete with a built-in sharpener and organized in a beautiful wooden case. "For my budding artist," Margaret whispered, remembering all the drawings that now decorated her refrigerator and bedroom walls, pictures of their little family, the garden, and always butterflies. The first guests began trickling into the backyard right on schedule, each arrival bringing covered dishes that filled the air with mouth-watering aromas and warm greetings that made the space feel like the heart of the community. Pastor Jim Miller and his wife Sarah came through the garden gate first, carrying their legendary cherry pie that had won the county fair 3 years running. The Hendersons from 2 houses down arrived with their energetic twin boys, who immediately gravitated toward Lily and the fascinating world of flowers and butterflies that had become her domain. "Oh, Margaret," Mrs. Peterson called out as she hurried across the lawn, her arms outstretched for one of her famous hugs that could cure just about any ailment known to womankind. "This garden is absolutely magical. Those lilies look like they're reaching straight up to touch the face of God Himself. They're a true testament to divine grace. Margaret's weathered hand reached out to gently caress one of the pristine white blooms, her touch as tender as a mother's kiss. "And to precious memory," she added softly, her voice carrying the weight of love and loss that had shaped her into the woman she'd become. "Each and every one of these flowers reminds me of my Michael and how our merciful Lord can bring the most incredible beauty from the deepest loss." As the afternoon unfolded, the backyard transformed into a living picture of community and fellowship that would have made Norman Rockwell weep with joy. The space filled with a comfortable buzz of conversation, punctuated by bursts of genuine laughter. Children played elaborate games of tag that wove between the carefully tended garden rows, while adults gathered around the mismatched collection of picnic tables that somehow managed to accommodate everyone perfectly. The scene embodied everything Margaret had once believed was lost to her forever. Family connections, true friendship, and faith, all beautifully intertwined in one perfect afternoon of blessing. When the time came for the meal, Pastor Jim rose from his seat at the head table, his gentle presence immediately commanding the respectful attention of the entire gathering. "Dear Lord," he began, his voice carrying the kind of authority that comes from years of walking alongside people through their darkest valleys and highest mountaintops, "we come before you with hearts overflowing with gratitude for this abundant food and precious fellowship. And we especially want to thank you for the powerful way you've shown us, through Margaret's beautiful family, that your love truly can heal the deepest wounds and restore what seemed lost forever." "Amen," the group echoed in unison, the word carrying the weight of shared belief and witnessed miracles. Margaret felt tears threatening to spill over as she reached for her napkin with trembling fingers. The overwhelming love surrounding her felt almost too much for her grateful heart to contain. "I hope you'll all forgive an old woman for speaking from her heart," she said, rising slowly from her chair with the dignity of someone who had learned that vulnerability was actually the highest form of strength. The animated conversations gradually faded to respectful silence as every face turned toward her, ready to receive whatever wisdom she felt called to share. "Just over a year ago, I was completely alone in this house, with nothing but bitter regret and crushing loneliness for company," she began, her voice gaining strength with each word. "I had lost my beloved husband to cancer, pushed away my precious son in my grief and stubborn pride, and convinced myself deep in my heart that I deserved every moment of the isolation I had created." Her voice trembled slightly, but she pressed on with the courage of someone who had learned that truth-telling was sacred work. She turned to smile at Ethan and Lily, her eyes shining with unshed tears of gratitude. "Then our gracious God, in His infinite wisdom and perfect timing, sent me a second chance disguised as strangers standing in a grocery store checkout line, though I had absolutely no idea at the time that I was witnessing the beginning of a miracle." Several of the women around the tables discreetly wiped away tears as Margaret continued, her words painting a picture of divine orchestration that left no doubt about the source of their blessings. "He sent me my grandson and great-granddaughter, carefully disguised as people in desperate need of help. And in the simple act of helping them, of opening my heart and my home, I discovered healing for wounds I thought would never stop bleeding." She gestured with both arms toward the flourishing garden that surrounded them all, the lilies standing like silent sentinels of hope in the golden afternoon light. "I learned something precious that I want to share with each of you. It's never, ever too late for grace to find us. Never too late for family to be restored. Never too late to start completely over with a clean slate." Her voice grew stronger as she pointed to the magnificent flowers. "These beautiful lilies? They're blooming in the exact spot where my bitterness and anger once grew like weeds. Every single flower serves as a daily reminder that our God truly can make all things new, no matter how broken they seem." After the meal concluded and guests began the familiar ritual of cleaning up and preparing to head home, Ethan discovered Margaret sitting quietly on the small wooden bench beside her favorite rosebush, the deep red variety that had been her wedding gift to herself 45 years ago. He approached slowly and settled beside her, both of them comfortable in the peaceful silence that was broken only by the distant sound of children's laughter echoing from the front yard. "You know something, Margaret?" he said finally, his voice thoughtful as he watched a butterfly land delicately on a nearby daisy. "For most of my life, I believed that faith was all about following rules perfectly and constantly worrying about judgment from God and other people. But you've shown me something completely different, that it's really about love extending beyond what we deserve and second chances when we think we've used them all up." Margaret reached over to pat his strong hand with her gentle one, her touch carrying decades of maternal wisdom. "Oh, my dear sweet boy," she whispered, her voice filled with wonder at the mysterious ways of Providence. "You showed me the exact same thing, and probably saved my life in the process. Sometimes it takes the pure, uncomplicated love of a child to teach us stubborn adults what grace actually means." They both turned to watch Lily as she patiently demonstrated the intricate art of daisy chain construction to a small group of fascinated friends. As the afternoon began to surrender to early evening, guests started the gradual process of saying their heartfelt goodbyes and gathering their empty dishes for the journey home. The last precious rays of sunshine painted the western sky in soft watercolor washes of pink and orange that seemed to glow with their own inner light. As darkness began to creep across the landscape, the first brave fireflies emerged from their daytime hiding places, their tiny lights beginning to dance between the flowers like living stars that had fallen to earth just to join their celebration. Margaret, Ethan, and Lily made their way to the wraparound porch and settled together onto the old wooden swing that had become their favorite spot for ending each blessed day. The gentle, rhythmic creaking of the chains created a peaceful soundtrack that matched their slow, contented swaying as they watched the magical transformation of their garden from day to night. "Look, Daddy!" Lily suddenly exclaimed, pointing with excitement toward the growing constellation of tiny lights. "The fireflies are having their own party right here in Grandma's garden. It's like they knew we had a celebration today." "Indeed they are, my precious sweetheart," Margaret agreed softly, gently squeezing her great-granddaughter's small, warm hand while marveling at the child's ability to find wonder in the smallest details. "Indeed, they are having quite the magnificent party." The three of them sat together in perfect harmony, these precious representatives of 3 generations, now bound together by an unbreakable chain of love, forgiveness, and divine grace. They watched in peaceful silence as nature provided its own spectacular light show among the white lilies and colorful roses. Their joined hands told an entire story without needing words, a story of deep healing, of family miraculously restored against all odds, and of faith renewed in the face of impossible circumstances. The fireflies continued their ancient dance, serving as tiny beacons of hope piercing the gathering darkness, while the lily blooms stood tall and proud in their neat rows, silent but powerful witnesses to the everyday miracle of second chances and the transformative power of love that refuses to give up. The automatic doors of Harrison's grocery slid open with a familiar hiss, the same sound that had once filled Ethan Cole with dread. Now, a year later, sunlight streamed through the glass panels like a warm embrace, casting long golden shadows across the polished linoleum floor. The afternoon light danced across the surfaces, transforming the ordinary into something beautiful. Ethan pushed the shopping cart with steady hands, his calloused fingers gripping the handle without the white-knuckled tension of old times. His 7-year-old daughter Lily skipped alongside him, her dark pigtails bouncing with each carefree step, the pink ribbons Margaret had tied that morning fluttering like tiny butterflies. The sound of her sneakers against the floor was pure joy, a melody of childhood innocence that never failed to make Ethan's heart swell. Margaret Hayes walked on his other side, her silver hair neatly styled in the soft waves she preferred, wearing a powder blue cardigan despite the warm spring day. The cardigan was one of her favorites, hand-knitted by her own mother decades ago, a piece of family history she now shared with her newfound grandson. Her small purse hung from her arm, and she moved with the dignified grace of someone who had learned to carry both sorrow and joy with equal measure. "Can we get strawberries, Daddy?" Lily asked, her bright eyes already focused on the produce section ahead. She pointed with enthusiasm toward the colorful displays of fresh fruit. "We can make that pie Grandma Margaret taught us, the one with the lattice top that looks like a basket." "Of course, sweetheart," Ethan replied, steering the cart toward the fruit display with deliberate care. His work boots newer now, without the worn-through soles of before-made soft squeaking sounds against the freshly mopped floor. The familiar scent of cleaning solution and fresh produce filled his nostrils, but instead of the anxiety it once triggered, it brought only pleasant memories of family shopping trips. Gone was the nervous tension that used to fill his shoulders and tighten his jaw in this very store. Instead, he moved with quiet confidence, his posture straight and relaxed. He checked items off the list Margaret had written in her elegant cursive, each carefully formed letter a small work of art that spoke of a gentler generation's attention to detail. The produce section buzzed with Sunday afternoon shoppers, families with children, elderly couples examining vegetables with practiced eyes, young professionals grabbing quick ingredients for the week ahead. Ethan no longer felt separate from them, no longer an outsider looking in through windows of lives he couldn't afford. He belonged here now, just another father shopping with his family. Margaret picked up a carton of strawberries, her weathered hands examining them with the practiced care of someone who had been selecting produce for over 50 years. She turned each berry gently, checking for firmness and color, her movements methodical but loving. "These look perfect for pie," she said, placing them carefully in the cart next to the milk and bread. "Your father used to love strawberry pie too, Ethan. He'd eat 2 slices before dinner if I let him, claiming he was just testing to make sure it was sweet enough." Ethan smiled, warmth spreading through his chest like honey, at hearing another story about his father. These days, the memories Margaret shared brought comfort instead of the sharp pain of loss that had once cut through him. Each story was a gift, filling in the blank spaces of his childhood with love and connection. "Like father, like son, I guess," he said, his voice soft with emotion, making Margaret chuckle in that gentle way that reminded him so much of church bells on quiet Sunday mornings. They continued through the aisles at an unhurried pace, filling their cart with groceries for the week ahead. Lily helped by reading items off the list, her small finger following each word as she sounded out the longer ones carefully. "Worcestershire sauce," she announced triumphantly after several attempts, making both adults beam with pride. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead in their characteristic way, but the sound no longer felt harsh or judgmental to Ethan. Instead, it was simply the background music of an ordinary Sunday afternoon with his family, a word that had taken on new meaning, expanding beyond what he'd ever thought possible. Margaret pointed out items as they passed, sharing little tips she'd learned over the years. "Always check the bottom of the milk containers," she advised, reaching past the front ones. "The fresher ones are usually in the back." Simple wisdom passed down through generations, the kind of knowledge that made a house feel like a home. When they reached the checkout line, Ethan noticed a young woman ahead of them. She wore pale green scrubs that had seen better days, probably just finishing a long shift at the hospital across town. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her shoulders sagged with exhaustion that Ethan recognized all too well. A toddler sat in her cart, playing contentedly with a small stuffed elephant, its gray fabric worn soft from countless hugs. As the cashier, a teenager with bright pink nail polish and a name tag reading Ashley, rang up the woman's items, the young mother's hands began to tremble slightly as she dug through her purse. The sound of loose change clinking together filled the air, a sound that made Ethan's stomach clench with memory. "I'm sorry," the woman mumbled, her voice barely above a whisper as she pulled out quarters and dimes, counting them with growing desperation. "I thought I had enough." Her cheeks flushed a deep red that spread down her neck, the kind of shame, heat that Ethan remembered burning through his own face in this very store. The people behind them began to shift restlessly. Someone cleared their throat impatiently. The woman's hands shook harder as she recounted the coins, her toddler, oblivious to the mounting tension, still making soft airplane noises with his stuffed elephant. Ethan felt his heart squeeze tight in his chest, the familiar ache of watching someone else experience the humiliation he knew so well. Every instinct told him to step forward, to reach for his wallet and help bridge the gap between dignity and desperation. But before he could move, Margaret stepped forward with the grace of someone who had learned that kindness was not about grand gestures, but about quiet moments of human connection. Her movements were unhurried, dignified, as she pulled a crisp $20 bill from her small leather purse, the same purse she'd carried for 15 years, a gift from her late husband that she treasured not for its value but for its memories. "Here, dear," Margaret said, placing the money gently on the counter beside the young woman's scattered change. Her voice carried the same warmth that had melted Ethan's defenses 1 year ago, a tone that spoke of understanding rather than pity. "No need to worry about it." The young mother looked up, startled, her eyes wide with a mixture of gratitude and embarrassment. "Oh no, I couldn't," she began, but Margaret's gentle smile stopped her protest. Margaret's smile deepened, reaching her eyes and crinkling the corners in the way that had become as familiar to Ethan as his own reflection. "I once met a man in this very store who reminded me of my son," she said softly, her gaze shifting to rest on Ethan with such love that it took his breath away. "He was struggling too, trying his best to take care of his little girl. Someone helped him that day, and it led to the greatest blessing of my life." Tears welled in Ethan's eyes as he watched the scene unfold, feeling like he was witnessing a sacred circle completing itself. The memories rushed back in a flood, his burning shame at fumbling with food stamps, Lily's innocent questions about why they couldn't afford chocolate milk, and Margaret's unexpected kindness that had been the first domino in a chain reaction of grace. Now here they stood, the circle complete, proof that sometimes the smallest acts of love could change entire worlds. The young mother wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, leaving a small smudge of mascara that somehow made her look even younger. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "You don't know what this means to me and my little boy." "God works in mysterious ways," Margaret replied, reaching out to pat the woman's arm with the same gentle touch she used to comfort Lily after bad dreams. "Sometimes he sends angels in grocery stores when we need them most." Lily tugged at Margaret's cardigan sleeve with small, insistent fingers. "Like when you helped Daddy and me, Grandma?" Her voice was clear and innocent, cutting through the adult complexity to the simple truth at the heart of everything. "Exactly like that, sweetheart," Margaret answered, pulling Lily close against her side, her hands smoothing down the little girl's hair. Sometimes the most beautiful families are the ones that find each other in unexpected places. The cashier, who had watched the entire exchange with growing awe, finished ringing up the young mother's groceries with extra care. As the woman gathered her bags and lifted her toddler from the cart, she turned back one last time. The gratitude in her eyes spoke volumes, not just thankfulness for the money, but recognition of the dignity with which it had been given. "God bless you," she whispered, and Ethan heard in those words an echo of his own prayer from a year ago, when hope had seemed as distant as the stars. When it was their turn, Ethan pulled out his wallet with steady hands, no longer trembling with anxiety or shame. No more food stamps, no more counting pennies twice and hoping for miracles. His new position as head mechanic at Morrison's auto shop provided well enough now, with benefits and respect that had seemed impossible in his darkest days. But more than financial security, he had something money couldn't buy: a family made whole through grace and second chances. Margaret placed their groceries in the cart with her usual care, while Lily helped, carefully handling the carton of eggs, just as her grandmother had taught her, treating each one like a precious treasure. The three of them walked toward the exit together, their footsteps creating a rhythm that spoke of belonging, of lives intertwined by something greater than chance. Sunlight poured through the glass doors ahead, warm and welcoming, bathing everything in golden light. It was the same light that had witnessed their first meeting, but now it felt different, not just illumination, but benediction, blessing the family that had been born in this ordinary place through extraordinary grace. What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below, and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you enjoyed the story of Ethan Cole, I handpicked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.